Call a regular meeting of the Pennington County Commission to order. Agendas are located in the back of the room. Also, speaker request forms are back there. So if you want to speak on an issue that's on the agenda, please fill out a speaker request form also. We'll start with a moment of silent reflection and Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Hadcock.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Hadcock. I might also just remind people to place their cell phones on silent. Item number 4, review and approve agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, point of privilege.
Commissioner Laster.
So reason why I want to draw this point of privilege right now is because I know we'll probably talk about it later, but sometimes some things need to be talked about in front with everybody else. And this weekend, we were a few of us were at the Durr Foundation event, and I just wanted to call attention to that event and what its mission is about veteran suicide and some of the issues of it. But several members of the county were there. Some of our employees were there, and it was great to visit with them. But one of our commissioners also received an award, and I'm not exactly sure what that award is about because I had to leave. So I would like to kind of learn a little bit more, but also for the community to hear what that award was and what it means for us, if that's possible.
Okay.
Commissioner Hadcock, I believe you received the Battle Buddy Award at the event.
Thanks, Commissioner Laster. It was a Battle Buddy Award. Should have said, okay. Actually, that award should have went to the family, the Durr family. They're amazing what they do for the veterans. Geez, I don't know why I always get sad at this. Anyway, they do an amazing job at helping veterans, men and women who come back from war that have PTSD. They do it with no overhead. All the money goes to the veterans that they serve. It's a great organization. Yes, they gave me an award, but that award should go to that family, the Durr family. I don't know if you've ever been to the event, but it's well attended. The people that speak at those events are veterans that have served that have PTSD, so they give their stories, and their stories are amazing. But again, I thank them for the award. I did not know I was getting that award, but again, that award should have been given to the Durr family before everything they do for our community for PTSD. They actually don't just serve South Dakota, they serve all veterans that come to South Dakota for their help. So thank you, Travis, for that. But that award is about our veterans and not about me. But thank you for that recognition.
Very, very purposeful for me to point that out. That's why. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, consent agenda. Holly Hennies.
Good morning, Commissioners. For public notice, the Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine items. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and a vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. Today's consent agenda contains the following items: approval of the minutes of the special meeting from September 27th, 2022, approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of October 4th, 2022. Number 7 is to approve a letter of support for the Hill City Ambulance District. Number 8 is to set the 2023 Board of Commission meeting dates. Number 9 is approval of the Festival of Lights Parade participant application and participant indemnification, statement of financial responsibility and waiver. Number 10 is approval of the fourth quarter local emergency management planning grant with the state of South Dakota. Number 11 is to approve the adopt a highway application for a portion of Highway 1416 by the Ellsworth Air Force Base Airmen Leadership School. And finally, number 12 is to recognize and thank the volunteers for the month of September 2022 submitted by Human Resources and Fire Administration.
Are there any members of the public that wish to have any of these items 5 through 12 removed from the consent agenda so that they can be discussed separately? Seeing none, is there any from the commission that want any of these items removed? Not, I'd take a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner LaCroy.
move for approval.
We got a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
And I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Superintendent Joe Miller, Highway.
Good morning, Commission. Joe Miller, Pennington County Highway Department. First item is item A, letting authorization for South Rochford Road. Seems kind of surreal to be standing here, getting that, putting this in front of you finally. Been working on this for my entire career here at the county, which is 4 years, and a long time before that. This project's been in the works since 2004. So the Forest Service has the right-of-way portfolio. They're in review. I sent out an email trying to get a feel yesterday for where they're at. They think probably by mid-November we'll have that letter of consent. And after that, it can proceed to the South Dakota DOT bid letting office for bid letting. Current proposed date would be December 14th for bid letting. It may, depending on how long the bid letting office needs, might spill into January, but we're very close to getting a bid letting for this project. The last engineer's estimate for this project that we have was 2 years ago, and it was estimated at $11.6 million. My current guess with the inflation and everything and kind of the projects we've seen, I've got budgeted $16 million for this project over a 2-year period. We're using STP funds, which we have about $4.6 million currently, and we'll get another about $1 million next year into that bank towards this project. And then we'll be using an SIB loan, which is a state infrastructure bank loan, for the remainder of this project. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions of Joe? Any public comment in regard to this?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Roskinek?
I'll move to approve the letting authorization on project 6P6403, 10 PCN 08P3 for the reconstruction of the South Rochford Road.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item B, Joe.
Item B, this is an agreement for construction administration services for 2023. For 2023, we've currently got 4 rehabilitation bridge projects on the books. We've got 3 total reconstructions on the books. The South Rochford Road reconstruction, along with many other in-house projects. So we reached out to Ferber looking for some help in inspecting our chip seals and our crack seals. So hopefully we don't end up with another incident like we had on Sharon Lake Road this year. Have a little bit closer eyes on them. And then with that, this will also provide a training opportunity for our engineering staff to work with alongside a very experienced engineering construction inspection team. The inspection team, it'll be the same inspection team that inspected Sharon Lake Road over the last 3 years. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions?
Here.
Commissioner Hadcock?
Motion to approve the agreement for services with Ferber Engineering Company Incorporated to perform 2023 construction administration services in a not to exceed amount of $21,600.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any public comment? The commission, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Commission.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to call on Sarah Frankenstein. Sarah's going to give us a presentation relative to elections. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. All right, we're in business. Again, I'm Sarah Frankenstein. I'm an attorney in town at Gunderson, Palmer, Goodsell, and Nelson. So I'm in private practice. I work for governments, though, very commonly. You've probably seen me before. I work with Jay and Tracy quite a bit. I represent and work with the county auditors throughout the state, like Cindy, because I work for the South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance, which is your insurer, so to speak. It's a risk pool, but same concept as insurance. 64 of the 66 counties in South Dakota use the South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance, so I advise 62, all 64 of those, I believe. So I work with county auditors on a regular basis. I work for county commissions, city councils, all aspects of government, and in particular, I help them through election issues. If you were like me and you watched the 2020 election chaos play out on the TV screen and you listened to the national conversation, the national news coverage, and you were wondering what was going on, well, imagine my frustration when I listened to the news media talk about all the wrong things and convince the public about all the wrong things going on and what were important and what drives the cases, the case law. Conflate the terms, conflate the election issues among the states when every state has very different election laws. Talk about them all as if all states are the same problems could occur in our state. Very frustrating for me to watch that unfold and then to watch the public discussion discuss things like election fraud, which we're going to talk about, when that's not actually what was at issue in most of the cases. That has colored the public's understanding. It certainly caused them to misunderstand how South Dakota law works, what types of fraud could occur here and what can't, because we have laws that just they won't allow it, and how to tighten up our system in the future. I give that speech in particular to legislators, and I'll give you a little sense of it because I do expect the legislature to tighten up some things after this term. But I want you to be savvy about the issue, right? You're in charge of elections here. Your county auditor runs state, federal, county elections. You're in charge of that. You should be able to talk the talk. You should understand the definitions and the terms. And you should know what did happen in other states but can't happen here, thankfully, and why it can't, and the ways that we can tighten up our system. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. I serve on the South Dakota State Advisory Commission that reports to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. I am not here in that capacity. I'm not a federal spokesperson. I'm here talking to you as Sarah Frankenstein with Gunderson Palmer. So, I bet you've heard a bazillion times that we have early voting. Go early vote, right? You've all heard that, South Dakota's early voting. We do not. We do not have early voting. We have no excuse. Absentee voting. Now, if you say, Sarah, when are you going to go early vote? I know what you mean. I'm not going to scold you. But keep in mind, other states have it. We do not. So what's the difference? In South Dakota, you have to apply for an absentee ballot. You fill out an application. I'm going to show it to you in a bit. You can turn that application in person. You can hand it to Cindy in her office. You can mail it in and get your ballot back in the mail. You cannot, like other states, just go to your polling place, your regular precinct polling place, and vote early because nobody's staffing it, right? That is what early voting is in other states. We obviously don't have that. In other states, that early voting means, in 3 states, the mail just brings you your ballot without requesting it, an unsolicited ballot. We don't have that. Colorado, Washington, and Oregon have that. And one other distinction is if you die before Election Day, but you've cast your absentee ballot in South Dakota, it's actually pulled. That absentee ballot serves as your proxy for not showing up on Election Day, and that does not take place in states that have early voting. Absentee ballots require an accompanying copy of a photo ID or a notarization. I'm going to show you the form in a second, plus the voter signature. I'm going to talk about that quite a bit here in a minute because this distinguishes South Dakota from other states, and it's really important to election integrity, which we do have in South Dakota. More on that in a bit. So many people just claim frustration. They don't know where to vote because of COVID. Their old polling place isn't open, and now they got to the polling place too late, and where do I go now? All of that frustration can be alleviated if people got familiar with the Secretary of State's website. I'd ask you to, I'd ask the public to, go on there. There's a wealth of information. First place to go is the RED, Voter Information Portal, the VIP. That's where you yourself go on there and you check a number of things. Type in your name, your date of birth, prove you're not a robot by typing in the verification code, and you can pull up your polling place, what part of you're registered to vote in, You can pull up your sample ballot. Here's my sample ballot. I just pulled this up the other day. I can print this off. I can figure out who I want to vote for. I can fill in those ovals ahead of time and walk into the polling place with it. Now, I can't cast this one that I had at home. I have to use the nice thicker cardstock one, but this can be my reference. All of this is available to the public online. And people can and should go see where their polling place is, especially in the days of COVID when not all churches and schools have offered up their place as a polling place. The place that you have voted for 30 years may have changed recently due to COVID. There's all these other things you can check online. We've heard some complaints that people have showed up at the polling place and their party has been switched, or the way to prevent that is to go online and check and make sure everything is as you expect it before late in the day on election day. You can go online to register to vote, but you can't register to vote online. What I mean by that is you can go, you can see the screen here, you can click that red voter registration form Word document, and you can print it out. You can hand fill it all in yourself, but you have to wet ink signature at the bottom. If you do this download, see the blue? If you do the download, you're going to get a form that looks like this. The blue fields are all ones that you can type in, so you don't have to handwrite it in, but notice the big box in the bottom right-hand corner. That one you cannot type in. You have to print it off after you've typed everything in, but you have to sign that with wet ink. Cannot fax it in to the county auditor, cannot email it in. It's got to come as an original to the county auditor. It's important. I'm going to link this back to the absentee voter application that you also have to sign in a second. But note, when you send this in, one of these slides I've got, let's see. Well, we'll get to it eventually, but we'll get to it eventually. I'll wait till I get there. All right, here's another screen from the Secretary of State's website. Lots of information here that people can and should review prior to. It's a really handy resource. There's the registration form. A lot of questions I get is about Field 6. I hear, especially in my role working for county auditors, where there's a high number of Native Americans in the county, they wonder, why can't we register to vote with a tribal ID? You don't need any ID to register to vote. If you look at Field 6 there, it says South Dakota driver's license number. And then below, if you don't have a South Dakota driver's license, provide the last 4 digits of your social security number. You don't need any ID at all. You don't even need to come in with your driver's license. The reason is because your photo ID is verified at the polling place, not registration, or with your absentee ballot. But it's not verified when you simply register to vote. So this makes it very easy for people to register. They don't have to supply a photo ID. They don't need any particular type of ID. They just need to rattle off their last 4 digits of their social security number, which we all know. If you're one of the few people on the planet who doesn't have a social security number, you still can register to vote if you sign an affidavit saying, I don't have either a number, but I am who I say I am. So it's just not an impediment to get registered in South Dakota. There's that zoom in on the signature required, and I'm going to come back to why that's important. And South Dakota does it right in requiring that wet ink original signature. When you go in to change your do anything different with your South Dakota driver's license, or you apply for just an ID card, you're going to see Section B on that DMV form. Section B is the voter registration section. In South Dakota, and in fact in all states, because the National Voter Registration Act requires this, when you go in and make any changes to your address, it will automatically serve as a change of your address for voter registration purposes. We've heard some complaints recently that it says choice of party blank, and then it goes on to say, if you don't fill anything in here, don't worry, we'll keep you with your party affiliation as registered previous. We've heard people say, well, I left it blank, and then they switched my party affiliation to blank, and therefore independent or NPA, no party affiliation. I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen any people come forward and be able to check that, but that is not how the National Voter Registration Act is set up. It is supposed to allow you to just automatically change your address when you went to the DMV and changed your address. Or you can register to vote entirely just at the DMV. So in South Dakota, the absentee voting has become extremely popular. It's also a cause of many problems in other states, but South Dakota really got it right with our absentee voting laws. Here's some reasons why. Remember, you got to send in your absentee ballot application in before 5 p.m. the day before the election. Should you wait till 5 p.m. before the day of the election? Certainly not in requesting a mailed absentee ballot to come to you in the mail. It won't even get to you before election day has already passed. But you can walk into your county auditor's office and request one up to 5 p.m. the day before. If you're going to send it in by mail, my recommendation is send it in at least 10 days before. It's got to be received by your county auditor on election day. Keep in mind that unless you have a separate kind of fictional precinct just for absentee ballots like Minnehaha does, I don't think you guys do you? No. Minnehaha has so many people that they created a precinct that's not a physical plot of land. It is just for all absentee ballots that come in. So they have their own separate precinct superintendent, precinct workers, that all they do is count the absentee ballots. You apparently do not. So that means if one of you votes absentee, it comes into Cindy's office here, but then it gets shipped out to wherever your precinct polling place is. So if you're out in the country, it goes to that precinct polling place and it's counted by that precinct superintendent. We do this here. You do? Okay. So in other counties, it has to get all the way out to their precinct polling place. So keep in mind, it's really important that the absentee ballot, at least in other counties, gets brought into the county auditor in time to make it out to those precinct polling places. So there's my recommendation to send it in early. Any ballots that come in after 7 p.m. on election day are not counted. This is important when we look at the things that went wrong in other states. But in South Dakota, after 7 p.m., if that ballot comes into the polling place, comes in by mail the next day, it is not counted. All right, here's the absentee ballot application form. Again, the blue fields, because online you can type in all those blue fields and then print that out, but notice what you can't type in, the voter signature at the bottom. It's required. They won't send you your ballot unless you've signed that in. Now, who can think back and tell me why it's important that that absentee ballot application has a voter signature? Remember, your registration form also has a wet ink signature as well. So the original, this person signed in their absentee ballot application, is that the same person that registered to vote? The county auditor's office checks those signature verifications. Not all the states did that in 2020. That's where a number of things also went wrong. More about that later. But in South Dakota, that's step one or two. Step one might be that this absentee ballot application came in with a copy of a photo ID. So now for the first time, your county auditor looks and can see a picture of you and know that you've got an ID. So somebody who sends in the application form is going to have a hard time doing it on behalf of someone else unless they are a family member maybe and have access to somebody's photo ID, copy it off, fill it out as if they're that family member, and then can forge their signature really well. Or the ID isn't photocopied, they don't sign it, and the county auditor's office just doesn't care and doesn't check. I have every reason to believe our county auditors in South Dakota look for the photo ID attached, check the signature. In other states, because of COVID, they said, don't bother seeing if there's an attached ID. We don't want you touching stuff. Or you're not a signature expert. Don't bother to compare the signatures. Thankfully, in South Dakota, we didn't have secretaries of state or county auditors giving those kinds of directives, and I do believe those verifications are happening. If not, I want to know, because I'd have to defend those county auditors if they get sued because they weren't doing it. But these are all good election integrity laws, and I have every reason to believe your county's following them too. Did you know that you can vote by messenger in South Dakota? I bet you've all heard of vote trafficking and vote harvesting. We don't have that in South Dakota. We shouldn't be talking about it unless it's because we want to more specifically prohibit it in South Dakota, but we already don't allow it. But what we have is something far superior to that, where other states got it way wrong. Here's what it is. If you're confined due to sickness, you're quarantined because of COVID, you're otherwise confined, or you have a disability that keeps you from getting out of the house, you can apply to have your ballot picked up at the county auditor's office, delivered to you. You can vote it in the comfort of your home where you're confined, and you send it back with that messenger. And look how wise South Dakota was in in creating this statute. Oh, I don't have the, yeah, maybe I do. Here it is. So here is the portion of the absentee ballot application that you should mark if you want a messenger. Look what South Dakota does. The person who's sick, disabled, and at home gets to choose who their messenger is. They don't just get surprised like in other states where a campaign worker knocks on the door. Here's your ballot. Would you like some help filling out your ballot? Oh, are you sure you want to vote for him? Oh, let me help you with this, and I'll return it back for you, or not, because I don't like who I saw you voted for. And the voter has no idea who just showed up at the door. Were they a paid campaigner? That's ballot harvesting. It happens in other states, not here. South Dakota, the person who's confined and sick gets to choose someone they trust. They can choose their spouse, their grandson, their neighbor, and they authorize that person. And then the messenger signs it too, saying, I accept, I'll do that. I will serve as the messenger for this person. How nice that our people who are shut in get to choose their messenger and both sign. South Dakota does it right. We also have a shut-in statute. I bet nobody knows these things exist, but I wish they were more understood and used. In South Dakota, we don't need ballot harvesters to come to our nursing homes and hospitals because better yet, Cindy does it, or her staff does it. So look at this statute. If there is any nursing facility, assisted living center, hospital, etc., within any county from which there might reasonably be expected to be 5 or more absentee ballot applications, the county auditor or someone with his or her office goes to that hospital. So it's an election worker that goes to the hospital. And better yet, South Dakota requires that both parties be notified, so Republican and Democrat parties can send somebody to watch, make sure it's all on the up and up, and anyone else who's just interested. You could have the press say, hey, I want to be on file saying I want to be notified when you go in so they can watch, they can report about it. Watchdogs can sign up. It's a great way for people who are stuck in a hospital, assisted living, nursing facility during the election time period to get their vote cast and counted. If you're a military person, you're deployed or you're overseas, there's the OLACAVA. It's an acronym that allows you to vote. That's a federal statute. And if you know anybody like that, send them to the Secretary of State's website. So y'all know on Election Day, we have 12 hours worth of voting. We remind everybody to bring your ID, but if you forget, you actually still can vote if you sign a provisional ballot. That provisional ballot goes in a special blue envelope, and it's looked at later to see if everything's correct. But otherwise, you should bring your ID. Tribal IDs count. Any kind of governmental issued ID counts. So provisional ballots, like I said, if you walk in and you forget your ID, you're going to be given a provisional ballot that gets sealed shut. Nobody gets to look at who you voted for, so they're not, your election workers aren't tempted to find that someone's vote should or should not count based upon who they voted for. Another thing people should know about provisional ballots, if you walk into your precinct polling place and the poll worker said, oh, Ms. Frankenstein, you're not on the list here. You're actually registered to vote in the precinct next over. You better go over there and vote. And I say, by golly, I'm not. I am registered here. I want to vote here. Election day is not the day to be ornery. On Election Day, if you are absolutely convinced you are registered to vote in that precinct, you can get handed a provisional ballot. You can vote it. It gets put in a blue envelope. And later, when the county auditor goes, no, Sarah really is voted, really is registered in the precinct over, my ballot's not going to count. If it was the county auditor's fault, somebody's fault along the way, and they see, oh, Sarah was right. What happened? But she's right. Then it is counted. So another reason to go look at the voter information portal prior to, don't be ornery with election workers on Election Day. Help them do their job by being helpful and go to the right precinct. Why is it important that you go to the right precinct? Why shouldn't we just let people vote wherever they want to vote? There's such a thing as ballot styles. Your county might have 10, they might have 15. So if you're Republican, that's one style of ballot, right? In primaries, Democrats, another style. I will live in a different city ward than you might. I might live in a different county commissioner district than you. Some things might overlap and some might not. Based upon where you live, there are any number of ballot styles that might be handed out in the precinct polling place. You'll see nationally a discussion about whether that should be abolished. It should not in South Dakota. First of all, it's the way that we have workable polling places on election day where every single ballot style that could possibly be handed out to anybody in the county doesn't have to be available in every polling place. There's only maybe one or two because that precinct doesn't have too many splits where there's people that might have different ballot styles. The more options there are to hand out ballots to the voters, the more human error there is. Remember, we had complaints coming from the eastern side of the state that people were handed the wrong ballot in the polling place. That happened because of after redistricting, there were splits. Precinct workers didn't before have a choice between two ballots. They always just handed one to everybody, and oh, now there's two, and they handed the wrong one. So you want to minimize splits. People who want to abolish precinct polling places have to have the right number of ballots, can't run out of the wrong ones, have to always hand the right one. And in South Dakota, we have residency requirements for school board and for municipality, not for counties for some reason. But if you want to vote in a school board election or in a city election, you have to, by statute, have lived there 30 days prior to. If you're a precinct worker who must live in the precinct, sees somebody walk in and says, Sarah, you moved out of town 2 years ago. You can't vote this ballot with the city ward election on. You should have updated your address. I'm going to challenge you for residency. Only people who live near you, who are your local precinct polling workers, would be able to challenge like that in the polling place. Without precincts, it's not likely, and the larger jurisdictions that you're in, it's not likely that anybody's going to say, Sarah, I know you moved out of town. People just won't know that in the polling place. So our system relies upon precincts. You can ask me about voter, have you guys done vote centers? Have you ever talked about, okay. Well, if you have questions about vote centers, that does do away with precinct polling places. I can take questions about that later if you're interested. All right. Now that you understand just the basics about South Dakota, you'll understand better what went wrong in other states, what other states just do poorly with their election law, and why it turned into such a mess that thank God we didn't have to deal with here. All right, back to my journalistic malpractice, I call it, with the media talking about election lawsuits fizzling, all the cases, all the complaints, all these headlines that just did not actually teach the public what actually happened. So first of all, I want to make sure that you, and as many people as I can reach, start using this term correctly. Fraud is a criminal term. Fraud is a crime. When we're talking about election fraud, it's okay to talk about it if you're talking about your state's attorney prosecuting the crime of voter fraud. That's okay to talk about it then. There's so many situations where that phrase should not be used because you're not using it right. But let's talk about actual voter fraud. So actual me voting as someone else. I took my husband's absentee ballot and I forged a signature. That's election fraud. Me voting a ballot I am not legally entitled to vote. That actual election fraud does occur. It does happen. The news media, when they tell you it doesn't, is not doing their homework. If you have a password like lawyers do to Westlaw or LexisNexis, you'll be able to find all kinds of criminal prosecutions, all kinds of elections that have been overturned due to actual election fraud, the crime. It is important to understand and stop, better yet prevent election fraud because it can affect elections. Nearly 25% of elections are decided by less than 2%. But remember, let's use the term right. There really is no fraud in our in-person voting where people present themselves in their precinct polling place on election day, photo ID in hand. You have to have that ID. It verifies to the poll workers that the person is who they say they are. The courts have to, in the National Voter Registration Act, you have to allow people who don't have an ID at all to still vote a provisional ballot. And then the election workers check later and it's sorted out later, but it's not counted that night. So just know if you forget your ID, you still get to vote. Election fraud primarily occurs outside of election day polling places. It happens in voting by mail, certainly, but other states have true mail-in voting, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. We have absentee voting that can be by mail or in person, not the same. In states that don't have a verification requirement of signatures, they allow online registration where nobody signs their name at all. You don't compare it to anything. You can send in your ballot with no signature on the back of your envelope. There's no comparison. And there's no photo ID requirement. The ballots just come in and there's no way to tell if this person registered voted this ballot. We do have that in South Dakota, though. As long as it's enforced, as long as our county auditors are doing that, and they're not accepting absentee ballot applications without the ID, right? They're actually comparing signatures, right? As long as that's happening, we have a good fail-safe system in South Dakota. All right. If you don't have a signature requirement, what should we do? What can happen and did happen in other states is that many ballots can be sent to one home, more ballots than people who live there. How can that happen? Well, let's go through how this happens. Not here, but it does happen elsewhere. All right, so in states that they have early voting and you can get unsolicited ballots of one type or another, that ballot is sent to an address because somebody registered to vote at that address. Let's say it's you. Let's say you live in a household of 2. You register to vote here in an apartment. Then you 2 move to Sioux Falls, but forget to change your voter registration. But you already marked, I want to vote absentee for this whole season, primary election and general election. So you've moved to Sioux Falls, but your ballots go to your old apartment in Rapid City. If you don't have mail forwarded, those new occupants of that apartment could get your ballots. Now in South Dakota, they would have to forge your name pretty darn well in order for them to vote your absentee ballot. Imagine in states that don't require the signature verification, though. 2 ballots just came to the wrong 2 people that could be voted in other states in that scenario. Imagine those 2 new occupants also registered to vote at that address. Now they're getting their own 2 ballots and they're getting your 2 ballots. Then imagine one dies and that's not caught in that state like it is in South Dakota, so that they're not taken off the list. Well, then another ballot comes in for a dead person. That's how we saw these pictures, and let me see if I can get to the pictures quick. You probably all saw these pictures on the news. This can't happen in South Dakota, but that's why it does and did happen in other places, because they didn't have a system like ours. Our total vote system that is the statewide system every county auditor uses, the Secretary of State uses. Every night, a check is run against the Department of Vital Statistics for people who are deceased, and it's also run against our South Dakota UJS, Unified Judicial System, for people who are convicted felons. It flags those people to remove them as eligible voters. Other states don't have that. So that's why you'll see this having occurred elsewhere, but thankfully not here. You can go through this to kind of go through the scenarios of why in other states there can be multiple ballots. So what if you lived here, you were registered here, and you moved to Nebraska, and you never changed your voter registration, and then you registered to vote in Nebraska? Now you're registered in 2 states. What if you fill out absentee ballot applications in both states, and so to your home comes a Nebraska ballot and a South Dakota ballot? You can probably vote it and not get caught. So what I constantly recommend is that South Dakota join this system. You'll see it in a second. There has to be a way for states to talk to one another to compare their registrations, right? Otherwise, you can have people registered in more than one state, and you can't catch it because their states aren't talking. Until ERIC was created. ERIC stands for Electronic Registration Information Center. And here's what it does. Every member state receives a report that shows voters who have moved out of the state. They can tell that from utility bills that they've signed up for in other states, things like that. Voters who have died, duplicate registrations in the same state, and it will spit out a report that shows you those potentially eligible to vote but are not yet registered. So you can use it for your Get Out the Vote campaigns. There's this nifty video that anybody interested should watch. It's at ericstates.org. Shows how this system works. Only 33 states are members, and South Dakota is not one of them. So I have been an advocate for us to join this so that we don't have people registered in South Dakota and also registered in other states, which means they get to vote for president twice. That's the common denominator on all those ballots. And that's the way we can stop that. We will catch you in South Dakota if you're showing up to register to vote, because every person in South Dakota has a voter ID number, one number. And so we catalog people in that way too. I'm going to skip some of this stuff. These are ways that other states went wrong, and voter fraud can and does occur, but South Dakota does not have same-day registration where they register and then cast their vote immediately before we can check if you're a convicted felon, before we can check your information at all. I went through ballot harvesting. This is where things went wrong in other states. South Dakota has the messenger system. It's very helpful. It's not abused. It would be extremely hard to game that system. I don't even know how you could. So what did happen in states like us, even though they had good laws like we do, are when election officials knew what the state law required, but they ignored them. Or the Secretary of State issued a directive saying, I know the state law requires you to compare the signatures, but you're not handwriting experts. Don't bother. That started to happen in 2020. People said, I know, people as in election administrators in other states said, I know we have this law that outlaws drop boxes, but COVID, we can't touch stuff. We don't want people coming in the courthouse. Let's bend that law a little bit and set up drop boxes. Now there's a controversy of, do we count the ballots in the drop box? It's not allowed under state law, but that's what people voted. We always hear reports on people who are paid to bus or paid to bring in harvested ballots. And in other places in particular, dead people on the voter rolls, non-residents, aliens, people who they're not citizens of the United States. They shouldn't be voting, but are. All right. Why don't we count absentee ballots with no signature on the envelope at all? And I wish I brought my props, I usually do, but if you've seen the big manila envelope that you put your absentee ballot in, you seal it shut, you put your stamp on, and on the back is where you sign, so it's right on the back. So that county auditor has to look and compare the signatures without opening the envelope, so they're not tempted to find, yes, it does or does not match based upon who you voted for. No temptation for election workers to count or not count ballots based upon who you voted for. It's a good system. But it's one thing to say this signature does not match this signature, but how about this signature on the registration form? I can't compare it. They forgot to sign the back of the envelope. Well, we don't count it because you can't compare it. But does that mean that the ballot in that envelope is fraudulent? Maybe. Maybe not. Let's say Commissioner Hadcock does everything right. She sends her for her absentee ballot. She gets it. She follows the directions. She looks at the envelope. She puts the stamp on like she should. She does everything right except she forgets to sign the back of the envelope. It's her ballot. She voted her ballot. And then let's say I get my husband and my absentee ballot in the mailbox, and I know my husband's gone for a couple of days. I'm just going to vote his ballot. You won't mind. I vote both of our ballots. I'm pretty good after being married for 20 years at forging my husband's name, and I do. That ballot comes in, my husband's, and that signature that I forged is compared against my husband's registration. It looks pretty close. I can sign my husband's signature pretty well. It's counted. Or let's change the scenario. Let's say I'm no good at it, and it's not counted. All right, so my husband's ballot, which was fraudulently voted by me, is put in this do not count pile. And Commissioner Hadcock's ballot had no signature on the back, so it's also not counted. It's in the same do not count pile. Should we talk about all of the ballots in the do not count pile as if that's election fraud? As if those ballots are fraudulent? Mine / my husband's was. I voted somebody else's ballot. Hers was not. So when we talk about in wholesale, should we count these in the do not count pile or not? We never should devolve into the conversation or the debate of whether or not they're fraudulent. Keep in mind, all of our laws are meant for fast-paced counting of ballots by the end of the night on election day. We cannot have a system where we're calling up various people, did you sign this or not? Whose signature? Let's get the analyst in the check signature. You can't have that type of research and background done on all these people to see if they committed fraud or not. You have to wholesale decide ahead of time with our laws, are we going to count these types of things or not? So one issue that I have with people who talk about election fraud is they use it in a way it doesn't apply and then they can't prove it. Of course they can't prove it. They can't prove that person was fraudulent. To even do so, first they'd have to call her up and she'd go, oh, no, I just forgot. It's not fraud. To catch me, you'd need a handwriting analyst. You'd need to interview my husband. You'd need to interview me. None of that can occur by election night. So it's okay to talk about this kind of thing as election improprieties, election illegalities maybe, but these laws that we have set to prevent fraud doesn't mean fraud is occurring, but they're still good laws. All right, so what we saw in 2020, what if a Secretary of State or a county auditor decided to count absentee ballots with no signature on the back? Let's let all people vote. Let's let all the votes count. I don't care if it's not signed, let's count it. That's what happened in 2020 in so many states. Instead of the lawsuit saying, Judge, there's a statute in this state that says if there's no signature on the back, they don't count, period. That's the law, just enforce the law. Instead, the conversation was about, well, let's talk about how many of these are fraudulent and which ones aren't. And so many people fell for that conversation. So here's the example I like to use. It's coming later, but let me talk about it now. Think to yourself, why South Dakota outlaws speeding? Is speeding in and of itself inherently evil? No, but what can happen when people speed? They crash, right? Speeding causes crashes. It causes people to injure their property, other people's property, themselves, and kill others. So we outlaw speeding, not because it's inherently evil, but because of what it can cause. It is meant to prevent and deter crashes. Why do we not count ballots with no signature on the back of the absentee envelope? Is that inherently evil? Did Commissioner Headcock do something inherently evil when she forgot to sign the back? No. But it is a law meant to prevent and catch voter fraud when it does occur. Imagine I zip off back home, speeding my way along the interstate, and get pulled over by a trooper. He pulls me over and gives me a ticket for doing 90 and a 65. And I say, oh yeah, I'll show you. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to defend myself. I walk into court and I say, Judge, that trooper gave me a speeding ticket with no proof of a crash. The wise prosecutor would say, actually, Judge, speeding is in and of itself illegal. I don't have to prove a crash. The foolish prosecutor would be what too many of us were in watching the TV and watching 2020 unfold. Too many of us said, Judge, I could prove a crash. Imagine the courtroom is now embroiled in the debate of whether or not Sarah Frankenstein crashed and who can prove whether I crashed before we determine whether she needs to pay her speeding ticket. Do you see how that discussion is so off base? So I want everybody listening to think differently about how to approach the issue of election fraud. It's not meant to and can never prove fraud later. It's meant to deter it, and it's got to do so wholesale. But let's not talk about how we can prove fraud. We don't need to. You don't need to. And that shouldn't be the discussion. Okay, another area states just went way wrong. This is the U.S. Constitution. In our U.S. Constitution, it says that if you're going to have federal elections for senators and representatives, those election laws that indicate the time, place, and manner of holding those elections shall be prescribed in each state, not Congress, by the legislature thereof. So under the Constitution, do secretaries of state get to determine time, place, and manner of elections? No. How about governors? No. How about judges? No, only the legislature determines how elections will be governed, and they do so obviously by creating statutes. I'm going to skip some of this about 2020, and I'm just going to use a couple cases. There's so many, but this will give you a really good concept of what actually happened in the litigation. Georgia had, like we do, a law that said any ballot that comes in after 7 p.m. on election day does not count. Well, there was a decree by the Georgia Secretary of State that I know that's the law, and I know the Constitution says the legislature gets to make those laws, but me as Secretary of State, I'm going to declare that because of COVID, we're going to count ballots that come in after 7, don't care what the law says. The Republican Party and the Trump campaign brought suit and said, Judge, he can't bend the law like that. The lawsuit was filed 2 days after Election Day. The court held the hearing on that very same day, the very same day that the complaint was filed. The plaintiffs alleged that, Judge, the law says you can't count ballots after 7, but now the Secretary of State says, never mind that law, do it anyway. We shouldn't be counting those. There was a number of cases that went back and forth, and judges allowed it and then stayed that, and then there was another case. And anyway, in the end, there was mass confusion about whether election workers should count those ballots or not. A poll worker witnessed some ballots come in. They're untabulated. They're not yet counted, and they're kind of in a pile over here. And the tabulated ones that went through the tabulators are over here. And as he's watching in the polling place, he sees somebody take the stack that's separated for some reason and mix them in with the ones that are tabulated. And he thinks, is that separate stack there because they came in after 7? Is somebody saying, hey, let's hold on and see whether we count those or not? So he starts to ask questions in the polling place. He's not able to get answers about what are those ballots, why were they there, why did you mix them? He's not able to get answers. So he fills out an affidavit. This lawsuit was filed. The Republican Party wanted a court order to ensure that these types of improprieties did not continue. No more mixing of the ballots. If those came in after 7, let's keep them separate until the court tells us do we count them or not. This hearing was held the very day the case was filed, 2 days after the election. Normally, what would attorneys do to work up their case? They would subpoena witnesses. They'd subpoena all the people in the courtroom. Who brought those in? Did they come in after 7? You'd find the answers because you subpoena witnesses, you subpoena documents. You go do an inspection of the polling, the election system on the computers being utilized there. None of that could happen because the hearing was held the same day the complaint was filed, 2 days after the election. So the court found this shouldn't shock you, that there was no evidence that the ballot reference over in this pile over here were received after 7. You had no evidence. Case dismissed. Well, don't we have no evidence? You get your evidence by subpoenaing documents. You hire attorneys to work this up. The trial happens 2 years later. You can't have election lawsuits that declare who the winner is 2 years later, right? There's just no way lawyers can work up cases that have evidence the very day that they file lawsuits 2 days after the election. There's of course no way to get that proof. So keep in mind what the conversation was about voter fraud that followed that case and all the rest. If those ballots came in after 7, and they should not have been counted because the legislature said we don't count them if they come in after 7. What if they were mixed with the rest and they were counted anyway? Is that voter fraud? Those ballots may have been legitimately voted by the person registered to vote in that name. That means that's not fraud, but they should not have been counted. So don't talk about it like it's fraud, because then the media says, you have no evidence of fraud, you can't prove it, you can never prove it. And they'd be right. Don't let the conversation change to one you'll always lose. Don't say you didn't prove Sarah Frankenstein crashed, so you can't charge her for speeding. Don't fall into that trap of discussing things not on topic in a way that you can never win, because you don't have to. So that's a huge problem with the way the media report it and the way people are still talking about these things. There's my speeding. All right, so this is why it's true when Bill Barr says no evidence of widespread voter fraud. He's talking about the wrong thing. The media's reporting about the wrong thing. We're not talking about fraud here. We're talking about if your election laws were violated. And because they were, should those votes count? All right, I already talked about this. I'm going to skip over some of this, but just know that when I call these expanded power cases, that's where some governor, secretary of state expanded their own power that they don't have and said, I know the law says this, but I'm not going to require it, because of COVID or whatever. That's how that litigation came about. So in South Dakota, what lesson do we learn? I'm just going to skip over a lot of this. What lesson should we learn here? In South Dakota, our laws can work, they do work. They will continue to work as long as they're followed, right? As long as we don't have a Secretary of State that says, I don't care what your laws say, I got a good reason why we're not going to follow them. As long as your county auditor doesn't say, I know what the laws say, I'm not going to follow them. As long as there's recourse in the law that when you see something illegally happening, there's a way to fix it. That is one issue we have with South Dakota laws, and I hope in our legislature through that. We got to this terrible place in 2020 where there was all this litigation and uncertainty because of the advent of convenience voting. It's this mail-in voting, it's the absentee voting, it's the bending of the rules, allowing ballot harvesting, executive orders. That's why other states suffered so terribly in 2020 and we did not, because South Dakota did not do that, thankfully. I know that there are some questions that will be posed to you about whether we should use automatic tabulators versus hand count. So I was asked to put some things together. I did not in any way include all the administrative rules or all the statutes on that because there are hundreds. Just know it's very highly governed how you use tabulators, how you use the ballots that go into the tabulators. There's just a few things that I do want you to note. This ARSD, Administrative Rule of South Dakota, requires your county auditor to put out a notice to the public telling them when they can come in and watch the tabulating equipment being tested. So that's the notice that they always put out. Here's the requirement for that notice to be put out. And then you'll see the second statute there, that test is repeated immediately before the start of the official count of the ballots. So those tabulators, they're tested. You can go watch them. You should go watch them. Ask your questions. There's just a whole number of statutes. You can take these home and look at them. You'll see a lot of dots because I'm just including portions of statutes. There's, like I said, hundreds. But we really heavily regulate how tabulating equipment is tested and can be used. You should know that the South Dakota Board of Elections is who chooses those tabulating machines. You don't. You don't get to choose which ones that you want. The whole state has to use a uniform method. Note this statute, SDCL 1217B2. I've highlighted and bolded this sentence that says no automated tabulating, electronic ballot marking, that's those machines, the express vote that you can use in the polling place, or election voting equipment system may be connected to the internet. My suggestion to the legislature is and has been to change that statute to say shall be connected to the internet. None of those machines shall be connected to the internet, not may. Let's make it stronger. And I'm also encouraging the new administration, the Secretary of State, to not only require their vendors to language in the vendor agreement contracts that say, this tabulation system that we're selling you, not only is it possible for it not to be connected to the internet, it will not be, it cannot be. Require that in the vendor agreement, require a penalty if somebody can prove that wrong. That'll be my suggestion. I do think the legislature will pass that. All right, so here's just some more stuff about how it's not in your hands to approve or not approve tabulating machines, and they're highly governed. This goes on and on. I say there's actually 10 things listed and then many more. This is just to give you an idea of the types of ways that it's regulated. I know there's a question of if you have to use tabulators. So this is the statute, 1217B3. It says any governing body having supervision of elections within any political subdivision may adopt, experiment with, or abandon any automatic tabulating or electronic ballot marking system approved for use by the Secretary of State. Let me first talk about the electronic ballot marking system. Those are the express vote machines. So if you're disabled, you need something blown up, you can use those express vote machines. If this is a federal election, which the next one is, you have to offer that. You must under the Help America Vote Act. So you can't just decide not to use those. You have to, despite what this statute says. But take a look, this is what gives you your options. Any governing body may use the system in all or some of the precincts within its jurisdiction or in a combination with any other type of voting system approved for use by the State Board of Elections. You can't approve your own different machines, but that's the statute that deals with that. Here's some stuff about paper ballots. Goodness, in a county your size, you're not going to want to use paper ballots because you'll be counting ballots for weeks. But there are provisions that allow you to do that, and really those aren't utilized because you kind of want to figure out who won the election by the end of the night or at least the next day. I've thrown a lot at you. I enjoy taking questions. Please ask me any that you have.
Ms. Frankenstein. Question relative to authority. We know that there's definitive statute that says Secretary of State is the chief election official in South Dakota. On a county level, who has that authority? Is there a definitive statute that gives that election official, in our case, the auditor,
It is, yeah.
control?
Yep, you'll see the term used throughout the statutes, election administrator. That's because for county, state, and federal, it's the county auditor by statute. For school board elections, it's the business manager. And for city elections, if they're not combined with county, it's the city finance officer. So to call them all one thing, they're called election administrators, but for you, it's your county auditor.
Okay, so does the Board of Commissioners have any authority relative to election, or does it lie upon the county auditor?
Well, you got to follow state statute. Both you and her do. A lot of times, the Secretary of State's office will give clarification to the county auditor's office. Sometimes it comports with my recommendations. Sometimes it does not. Actually, Secretary of State's office knows that I advise county auditors. They know that I get a lot of phone calls for my advice, and so the Secretary of State's office will call me and make sure they're not saying something different oftentimes. But you know, the question, really at the heart of your question is, are you her boss? Do you get to tell her what to do or not? She's an elected official, right? So you always have the power of the purse. You don't, you could make it some kind of battle over who gets to, let's say Cindy were to say, we're not going to do signature verifications anymore. I don't want people touching stuff because of COVID. Let's say she said that, and you had a problem with that. You could certainly do everything within your power, but I don't know if you could force her.
Okay.
I don't know how you would.
Thank you. Commissioner Adcock.
So can you hook these tabulators machines to the internet? Can they be hooked to the internet?
I don't know. So I can tell you everything about election law. I'm not an expert on machines, the internet, or that type of thing.
When I was reading up on them, they were called ESS machines, and it looked like you could or could not hook them to the internet. So when I looked, it looked like some of those could be hooked to the internet.
That's the question.
Well, and that they maybe could be hacked. So, and if they could, how would you be able to tell if, and not that we do that, it's that if they could be hooked to the internet, then they could be hacked. Then somebody could do something with the machines. So how would we tell in Pennington County if somebody did hack them or they were hooked to the internet?
That's above my pay grade. I do not have expertise in how to determine if a machine can or cannot be hacked, but I can tell you how that law needs to change. Instead of saying it may not be connected to the internet, it should say shall not be, and there should be provisions with what happens if there's the ability for that to happen. The vendor should be required to show how it cannot happen. But without that, you can't approve a different system. You can choose to abandon it and go hand count, but boy, with a county of your size, do also know any auditor you speak to will tell you when you hand count, you will have human error. The tabulating machines don't have the kind of human error that you'll have, and I think you'll have a lot of issues. I would suggest that you do some spot checks. I mean, that statute gives you some leeway.
Well, why I say that is, yeah, I've been doing a lot of reading. I've been reading on both sides, and I've been reading on human error And I've been reading on tabulators and ESS machines and hacking and internet and a lot of different on both sides. And I'm seeing both sides have good points and both sides have solutions. Bottom line is, like I said, I think both sides have solutions, but I also think our laws need to change in South Dakota with some of it if we're going to use ESS machines. And if you could hook them up, and if there is and can be hacked, then, and we can't be able to tell, and maybe Cindy has those answers and she knows all about ESS machines, or we have someone that does, that can tell us more information on them. Travis, I know, has been looking a lot into it as well. But for me, that's what I've been reading a lot on. I don't have a decision on either side for me right now. I just am looking at all the information. But boy, I bet you I've spent hours and hours trying to figure this out as well. And I did like your information today as well. The difference between fraud and the difference between, you're telling me one thing, but where's the proof? So I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lassiter.
if you're going to answer, go ahead.
Yeah, just let me say that I appreciate that you're taking the time to wrestle with us, but the people who should be wrestling with is the State Board of Elections. They're the ones who approve those systems. I mean, this is their job. The Secretary of State then, executes that. They enter into the vendor agreements. They work with those systems, and they just hand them down to the auditors. The auditors don't get to say, no, thanks, I want a different system. Neither do you. So while I appreciate the homework, this needs to be put on the laps of the State Board of Elections and the Secretary of State's office.
And just one more thing. When I come to and I talk about our auditor, there's trust, and I always have had trust. And I believe when she's doing her job and her team is doing her job, even though I understand about ESS machines and things like that, when she's telling me she's doing it right, and I've seen that she does it right, I trust that she's doing what she's supposed to do. So I also will say that, even though I'm looking into this information. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lassiter.
Thanks for your presentation. One of the things I probably missed in all my research, I think you and I are kind of spot on some of the quality checks and the spot checking and things of that nature, because this is some of the stuff I'm drafting up for our meeting next week. But I do also like that recommendation of moving it from may to shall, or what was it? I wrote it down.
Yeah, from May to shall.
Yeah, from may to shall, which is a stronger in the statute, and putting a teeth to it, putting some kind of monetary fine to the contractor if they fail to meet that. Do you know, and so my question to you is primarily on this, and I know you said you're not an election expert on this level, but do you know if we even have a quality check process to verify that when we got our machines here, do you know if the State Board of Elections or anybody, the Secretary of State, says, okay, we ordered this machine, we know it's not supposed to connect to the internet, let's open it up and verify it doesn't have or does have what it needs, and then reseal it up and then send it to the counties? Do you know if that process is even there?
I know there's a process for them to have approved those in the first place. I don't know what all it included. You can see in the administrative rules and the statutes when they're tested, like what your county auditor is going to do, and you can watch, there is just a whole number of things that it has to be able to do. There's a whole list of things that any system, whether it's ES&S or another brand, would have to be able to do before it's subject to potential approval. There's things like that in the regs. Again, that's for the Board of Elections and the Secretary of State to determine, not you. I'm not saying you shouldn't look into it. I'm just saying it's not your burden, but I'm glad people are looking at it.
And follow up, sir. I know at the end of an election, we have to sign something. What is it that we are signing about the election?
Are you a precinct worker?
No, as the Board of Commission, I think we sign something about the canvassing.
Canvassing.
Yeah, what is that, and what specifically were you signing about that? And I'm just asking that question for public knowledge.
That's the method that you use to make sure that the number of ballots cast were equaling the number of ballots voted, right? Making sure that those numbers, so you get to take a look at them before the final before the final certification. That's called the canvass.
And that's when we look at those numbers, we say, yep, they match and we're good to go.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Ms. Frankenstein?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix.
But I appreciate your presentation, I mean, a lot of information that I think we didn't know beforehand. And I also had gone up to the auditor's office along with another commissioner, and watched how things were done and so forth, but I also was a poll worker a couple different times and listening to you talk about the provisional, absolutely, and we worked hard with the people coming in, calling down here where to see where they needed to go to get them to, so they didn't have to do a provisional and got them to the right places. So, you know, without being all these years doing the actual poll work, I would have not known a lot about what you talked about, but it gave me great respect of how we do things.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Eskenek.
I'd like to think that the experts relative to voting in the elections in the state of South Dakota are the 66 county auditors that have to go through the process. I think they're the experts. They're the ones that, if I have a question, I'm gonna go to my county auditor because that's her, she lives that life every day. So I'd like to think, we have to rely on their expertise when we go forward with future elections.
Any other questions of Ms. Frankenstein? Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of speaker request forms. Mr. Ellsworth? Your request to speak
Chad
on item
Ellsworth.
14.
Real quickly, and I'll yield to Matthew and Tanchi if they're there. I oppose this meeting because it seems to me to be a preemption of the special session coming up.
Mr. Ellsworth, I might point out that this was,
Being
this
point of
was,
order,
Mr.
have
Ellsworth,
the floor.
I want to point out, first of all, that this was scheduled long before Mr. Monfort came forward. And so this was not something that was done to preempt a special meeting.
There was no public notice of that.
It's posted on the
There was no
agenda.
public notice of what, of.
It's
you
posted on the
scheduling.
agenda, Mr. Ellsworth.
I've checked the agenda. There's no public notice. I want to go in further, that the so-called expert witness that you have here is conflicted out like you are. She's a part of Carter versus Custer, a case right now going on where they're talking about public payoffs of public officials. She was involved with State versus Roundsburg, along with Vargo and the impeachment proceeding. She is deeply involved with Butler and Vargo on rigging that whole impeachment. I'm going to yield at this time.
Any questions of Mr. Ellsworth? Next speaker request form I have is from Mr. Monfort.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Monfort, I just want to point out that in the future, when you're at meetings like this,
Yeah.
instead of vehemently trying to shake your head at something you don't agree with for everybody to see, I suggest you refrain from that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. As a young man, and I don't know Mr. Ellsworth real well, but I did follow the rules to be on the agenda at last meeting in good faith. And we had all of our speakers here, experts that are experts in the realm of computers. And we were relegated to a few minutes. And then I have been instructed that for the upcoming special meeting, that we're going to be given 1 hour. If Miss Frankenstein is representing it, and I do have questions about who sent her here or who she's working for. I've seen interaction between her and the auditor. I do have questions that she was giving over an hour today. We are relegated to.
It's not given over an hour.
I've timed it. So.
Part of what you may be timed was questions that was asked for him.
Okay, well, an hour, and we were instructed that we will be given only an hour for the special commissioner meeting next week on the 26th, and that your guys' staff, the term was used, will be given an additional hour. So that's 2 hours to 1 hour. That is my concern. The reason I'm shaking my head is because my default position is I don't trust you guys. And I know that's built over time. So I don't know if I was going to be silenced right now or given an opportunity to address specifically what Ms. Frankenstein had talked about.
Well, I don't think you warmed any of our hearts by calling us ignorant and our county auditor ignorant.
Yeah,
So
brainwashed was the term that I used, yes.
ignorant
Yes.
is in writing.
Yeah, ignorant, and I use the term de-brainwashing. The reason why I use that, and I do not have trust for officials as a young man, I'm not getting paid as a lawyer or as a representative by anybody. I'm a concerned citizen here. The reason why I do not have trust is because when we address a county commissioner, this is the hierarchy in South Dakota. The commissioner talks to the auditor talks to the Secretary of State's office, who talks to the vendor. So at the very top of our hierarchy is ES&S, and they are notorious for lying. This is in writing.
Do you have proof of that?
I do, and I believe I submitted it to you in that packet of information. So Political, which is not a Republican Trump conspiracy right-wing writer, posted the email exchange or letter exchange between the EAC, which according to South Dakota codified law, we must adhere to. The Election Assistance Commission. Ms. Frankenstein mentioned the HAVA Act and how we have to adhere to that if you're going to have the direct tabulator equipment. So if we're going to follow that train of thought, we are in violation of that. I give you guys an affidavit by Rick Weibel that these machines, this is an issue that she did not address regarding cast vote records, which are computer logs of those that are non-personally identifiable. Are not certifiable if they do not produce that. If we're following the Election Assistance Commission and the HAVA Act, which she was talking about, the Help America Vote Act, which I believe was 2002 or 2004. In regards to this hierarchy that I'm talking about, so ES&S had 33,000 machines that have modems in them, and they got in trouble because they did not address that in what was certified. And so the EAC said that you cannot call them certified if they have these modems in them. So ES&S is notorious for that. They also got caught lying to the New York Times, and then Senator Wyden of Oregon, who is a Democrat, called them on that, and then they admitted that they had modems in it. So at the top of the hierarchy in South Dakota, if we're saying, well, the vendor says they have proven that they are not trustworthy. Now the Secretary of State's office, we have an email, I put that in the packet last time, in which I gave to you guys. That was the Director of Elections in South Dakota, Kia Warren. And she said cast vote records do not exist. Pretty much that was the propaganda that was spewed to every auditor in our state, in which they told us when we requested that record, cast vote records do not exist. We know that that's not true. One, on the 2nd of October, Secretary of State Steve Barnett admitted to South Dakota News Watch that these records do indeed exist. And we have 1,000 of them, of the 3,000 counties in America, and we do have computer experts on our side. The Secretary of State's office and the vendor for ES&S has not provided us any of their computer experts. We are providing the computer experts. So if it goes from commissioner to auditor to Secretary of State and ES&S, the two top, at the top of the hierarchy, have proven that they are not trustworthy or they are confused. Now, in regards to Ms. Frankenstein talking about whether or not you have the decision to abandon tabulator machines, when she cited that statute, if you look at that, it does not say that you have to do what the Board of Electors says. It says that you have the option to reject what the Board of Electors has approved. She talks about the difference between fraud and irregularities, and if you looked at her slide, she also said illegalities. And I think that that's, as a lawyer, she's probably trying to be careful of the term fraud and illegalities. From a common person like myself, I don't understand the difference between fraud and an illegality. If they both seem to address breaking the law. She did have slides up there when she was talking about Trump, and I did appreciate some of the things that, Mr. Chair, I did appreciate certain things that Ms. Frankenstein had said. She mentioned Trump and the allegations in courts and lawsuits. So if you go to election-integrity.info, there's a list of 90 court cases, as well as an article by the Epoch Times in which Trump actually won 15 of 22 court cases. He was not losing all these court cases that the media, as you know, we all know there's a media war out there, two conflicting sides of the equation. Very concerning to me is that she proposed ERIC voting rolls. ERIC voting rolls are an open society funded program. And what would happen is you would pay, I believe the membership fee is $25,000. And those fees can go, to my understanding, can go into the millions of dollars that we would pay. And what we would do is they have access to our DMV address DMV information, which to my understanding would also include your date of birth, which we as citizens are not allowed to get from our auditor on our voter rolls as of 2020. That was a law that was passed, to my understanding. Would have access to the last four of our social security, and they're supposed to, quote, clean the voter rolls. The Secretary of State of Louisiana, Ardoin, he just recently had a press release in which they are saying that they are going to opt out of ERIC, along with a handful of other states, because they're not cleaning the voter rolls. And I would challenge everybody to, Mr. Chair, I would challenge the commissioners to look into that carefully. I did not intend to be discourteous to you, but as a young man, I know lots of our public officials and public leaders are concerned about our youth in America and how we're not involved. As I'm starting to get involved, my default position has been, because of what I have seen, that I do not trust public officials. And I think I'd love to build that trust, but that's where I'm at right now. So I know it may seem disrespectful, but that's just, as a young man, where I'm at. So I have more to say, and I appreciate the time that you allowed and gave me here to speak. Those are my concerns.
Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Adcock.
Mr. Monafor, couple of things. You said commissioner to auditor to state to ESS. It might work that way, that's how the system works, but as a commissioner, because there's a way in how hierarchy works, or however you're saying that,
Yeah.
As a commissioner, I take all pieces and parts and then I tear it apart, kind of like you do. And that's how I figure out the system, or what works, how, when, why, what works, kind of like you're doing.
Yeah.
I look at both sides, as you see. I've been watching your videos. I've been watching things that have sent me from both sides to try to figure out information. I always have. That lawyer you're talking about, also, which is Mrs. Frankenstein, has integrity. She told the truth on the ESS machines. I asked her. She talked about the tabulators. She told the truth that she did not know about the hacking. She said that there was some information that she did not know. I respect that.
Yep.
The things that she did say was and she said she wasn't here as a lawyer. She was here as a person that was representing, and we asked her to tell the other side of some of these things that we did not know. She was an expert on some of these things. She told stuff she wasn't an expert on. I respect that. I respect some of the stuff you know, that you don't trust elected officials. Well, that's pretty normal. That doesn't offend me at all. I can understand that. So that doesn't offend me. It doesn't offend me at all, because that is normal. So you speak really good truths, but beating people up in a way that integrity and stuff like that, some of us do have good integrity, and we try the best that we can to figure out both sides. So you don't have to trust me, or you don't have to always be nice to me, but at least try to understand the other side of this, of trying to see both sides and figuring out what is the best for both sides, because we're not all untrustworthy.
Appreciate that.
So that's all we're asking. When people come up here and beat us up or beat up other people, we don't want to see that. We want you to be respectful. Tell your side, tell your truths, or what you think to be your truths. Let us figure some of that out. But don't sit up here and tell us what we're doing wrong. Find some solutions with what can help with the systems, with what we can do to help the systems, like Sarah did. And some of these things that you see as a young person going, these are the things I'm seeing, Deb. These are the things I'm seeing, Gary. How can you make a difference, or how can we make a difference? Sarah actually said, this is how you can make a difference. If you want to make a difference, you tell us you need to go to peer. It is going to make a difference that you have to, on these tabulator machines, you have to make sure they're not on the internet. You have to make sure this way. That's how you make a difference for us. That's how you start to trust us, because we are going to fight for you. We are going to fight for that. That's how you make a difference. And then we go to Becky Jury. We go to those legislators. That's how you make a difference. And when we don't do that, that's when that trust doesn't come anymore. Make sense?
Yes.
Because you are on the side of trying to do the right thing. You say you're a Christian. You say you're a person that wants to do the right thing by God. Well, all of us are trying to do that same thing, but we need your help as well. And how we do that, again, is you work as a team and you find solution. All right? And
Commissioner Ross,
that's what I'm thinking.
Commissioner
Thank
Ross
you.
Connect.
Mr. Chair, Matt, I've been trying to, when you send an email, I try to respond, be courteous, so I'm not hiding anything. I want to be very transparent. I did send you an email, and it had 3 websites, and those websites were specific to what the problems are with hand counting. I know that's what you would like to see in Pennington County is hand counting. And I said, would you please go to these 3 websites and review those websites and the issues that come along with hand counting, and I never got a response back. So with that being said, I've been trying to look at both sides as well, and I wanted to see a rebuttal, and I never did get a response back. Just wanted to get that out there for clarification.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if
Wants to answer?
Go ahead.
I believe I could be wrong, but I'm sorry if that happened. I tried to send you I was in my mind that I believe I sent was I got your email and I will check those out. I had an event this weekend for 4 days, 3 or 4 days straight, and I was the one hosting it. So I didn't even shower this morning. So I'm sorry.
That's
I
fine.
apologize for that, but I did get your email, and I do have those articles, and I'm aware of the issues with hand counting.
But I just want to, I think there's certain problems that come along with hand counting, because hand counting is done by human beings, and we know human beings make mistakes. So I don't think there's any perfect solution, but I still have I think every county is a little bit different. I think with the number of people and voters in Pennington County, it gets a little more problematic because of the number. And I've actually went to the auditor's office last week, and we talked about if we did go hand counting, the problems that come along with that. And so it might be an alternative, but I don't know. I just have a hard time with the number of voters in this county. I'm thinking that if that tabulator is not hooked up to a modem, I'm leaning towards a machine versus hand counting.
Mr. Chair, may I address the hand counting briefly? So the issue, the main issue with hand counting is that we can actually look at them with having a machine. It's a black box. Nobody can look at that. If there's a question, unless we're given cast vote records, which I mentioned earlier, I won't belabor that point. With hand counting, you can have eyes on them, and it's open. When you have fraud or with hand counting, it's by the tens. Could someone bring in a garbage bag full of ballots? Yeah, that's much more obvious when you're flipping votes. And the allegations that we're having in Pennington County is that there are, I'll say hundreds of votes that were flipped in the 2020 election. I could say more, but I'm being conservative. And when you go to our own Secretary of State's website, according to the official list of votes counted, I'm not talking about just registered. There is between the Secretary of State's website official results and then the county canvas, when you add up the counties, there's it's like 4,800 vote discrepancy, and that's the official results. So even anybody can go look at that. So there's an issue statewide, and then of course we could parse out what it is in Pennington County. So when electronically, it's much more easy to steal more at a time than it would be to bring in a garbage bag. So.
Thank you.
Commissioner LaCroix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's more of a statement. Matt, I answered your call right away.
Yeah.
I got it when we talked, and I told you, in our conversation that I was disappointed with some of the things that you were saying, because you were indicating that we were untrustworthy, that we lied to you, or dirty politics, and I asked you to explain, and we had that conversation. And you always refer to it, this is what I'm hearing. It's not coming from me, it's what I'm being told in that conversation. I've received 12 of your text messages with all the information. I was trying to look up, see if there was any more, but last time I counted, I had 12 text messages saying some of the stuff that you're doing. And you also sent me video clips of Mr. Drew's interview, because that was one of the things that we disagreed on. And I went back and I watched it that night, and I didn't agree with what you were saying. I didn't believe he was trying to mislead the public. He stayed, I can't even repeat what you said, but you were trying to say that he was misleading the public, and I didn't see it that way. So I think we had a good conversation, and I'm glad you came here today. You were very respectful, and you're not making those allegations as you did in your emails and on the phone that day. Because I think what we need to hear is, as Ms. Frankenstein said, facts and what's going forward. And that's what I've heard from this commission, is they're looking at the information and the facts, and that's what we want to look at. But you could look at an email and put whatever you want in it, just as you did with that interview. When you seen that, your frame of mind was, and I didn't see that. I just wanted to express that form of how you present yourself is how the conversation is going to go. And I think me and you got on a level field because we were honest with each other. We were telling each other, I didn't believe what you saw, and we came out that way. But I just wanted to express that, be careful. I mean, because I was offended, not only for Mr. Drew, but for our commission, for some of the stuff that the allegations you were making.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Roskinek.
I guess in closing, Matt, I don't think there's one commissioner, elected official up here that would condone any form of illegal election fraud. So I just want that, mention that for the record. If we could really see some solid proof, I think we could take some action. But right now, it's just, to me, it's just a lot of hearsay, but I'm certainly willing to listen in the future.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lassiter.
I was going to make a statement. I may ask a question, depends. But anyway, Ron kind of hit it on the head. What I was going to say, I was going to start out saying, I'm looking into this because I want to make sure that, as a county commissioner, I want to make sure every resident of Pennington County's vote is counted appropriately. I don't want any illegal votes. I don't want any fraud. I don't want any, I want the system to be squared up to the best of it as it possibly can, so that we're making sure that we're getting the best election results that we can. Does that make sense? And I'm pretty sure, I would say my counterparts up here on the dais agree with that. And so going through all the information that I've read, sounds like Commissioner Hadcock's read a lot. Sounds like everybody's been given some stuff to read through and look at. I think what you're going to find is that we agree that there are some things that can be done and should be done. We may not agree exactly on the exact things between all of us, or even between everybody out in the audience. But I think what I'm willing to say is I'm putting together a paper of my recommendations for the commission to look at for the meeting on next Tuesday, so that we can address some of the things that I think are very, very important. Some of it's stuff that we talked about with Dr. Frank when you and I sat down with Dr. Frank. And I think it's important to know that you're going to get something out of us from us pushing it forward, because we agree that there's some concerns. I mean, Mrs. Frankenstein pointed out some things that she's going to push forward to the legislation too, that they need to fix these things. I think mine's going to include some of her stuff as well. But when it's all said and done, decorum and conversations between all of us is a must, because if you don't do that, sometimes you turn people off, even though they may be willing to listen. They may get turned off because of the way it was presented to them. And then it makes it harder sometimes for other conversations to happen and get things moving in a different manner. So, I think you'll be, I'm waiting to see what you guys have to say on Tuesday, but I also think that y'all need to listen to what we're going to be giving some presentation back for input, and then give us some really good solid input as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Wednesday.
And still my speculation still stands. If Ms. Frankenstein is a part of your team for next week, or that's considered a part of your guys' arguments, that's 2 hours to 1 hour, and I have several experts, and that was one person. I mean, I understand that you're concerned with the way that I brought that out because it is a class 2 misdemeanor if, public comment or your policy is not followed. And if I still am skeptical of that because the impropriety or the inequity of it still stands, 2 hours to 1 hour. Obviously, I got on the agenda this morning, and I'm appreciative of the fact that I'm allowed to speak. So maybe that letter to you did have an effect. I didn't swear at you. I used a strong word that I hope wakes you up because you're not just this commission or this auditor, but every auditor and commissioners that I talk to, it's the same thing. And the best way that I know that where that's coming from is the Secretary of State's office. And they are not either confused or they're untrustworthy, and they've proven that. So that point still stands. As far as your authority, if you, once again, I'm going to reiterate, you do have authority, and you do sign your names. You do sign your names to certify the election. That is the job of the county commissioners. So if you have taken an oath to your office, how can you sign off on an election when there is fraud occurring?
Mr. Monfort, you continually say that there's illegal activity or fraud taking place.
Yeah.
You say that you provided us with actual proof in your emails. I've read all those emails. I don't see any proof of any of that. There's accusations, but there's no proof. And what we're talking about is South Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are illegal activities in other states. But in South Dakota, I've come to the conclusion that South Dakota runs their elections extremely well.
And Mr. Chair, I'd address to you that even according to the own Secretary of State's website, there's over 4,000 voter, not registration, not somebody that moved, not somebody that died, voter discrepancy. That's a lot of fraud. And besides the affidavits that South Dakota Canvassing has collected, they are in the hundreds. I've been informed that some were given to Cindy. I don't know which ones. When I talk to South Dakota Canvassing, they say that it's a crime. I cannot see all those. So,
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lassiter.
I got a follow up on that. And I kind of get where Commissioner Drews is going with this one. And, I've asked a couple of different things. I know when Rick Ribel was here, he gave us a package. I've gone through that package fairly extensively, but I didn't see any affidavits given to us so that we could review those affidavits. So if that's proof, we haven't received it to see it. And I've told everybody that if you bring me proof, I'll run it down. I'll run it through the ringer. I mean, I've done investigations when I was in the military. I mean, that's one of the jobs that I had to do in some of my positions. But the other thing I've asked for, and this again, you talk about CVRs, and you know where I'm going with this. I've asked if you've got a copy of CVRs in the state of South Dakota, I would like to see them so I can verify with what the EAC says, because I've been reading the scripts from the EAC and what they're supposed to say and things of that nature. So I need those if you have them, which I've been told that there are some, but every time I ask, I'm not receiving those so that I can compare and verify the validity of it. If we can't compare the validity of the evidence, we can't agree or disagree that there's actual evidence of fraud or illegalities or any of that nature. So whenever I ask that, and it's been a week or more, and it's not presented, how can we then truly dive into that investigation that you're asking us to do? Because if we don't have it, we can't do it.
and we are being denied the CVRs.
I've been told by individuals that are working with y'all that y'all have them, but they're unwilling to give them to us because they're wrapped up in court cases. Now, either you give them to us so that we can look at them, so that we can say, let's help you with your court case, or not.
Mr. Chair, in address to that, there were 2 counties. I've not been told which counties there are, but we do have them. But because not every county has the software for that, they're encrypted. And so we're working on getting them unencrypted.
Okay, so you have CVRs, but you can't read them, so you don't even know what they say on them.
We know from 1,000 counties in America what a CVR is. And I know we talked about San Francisco County in California. They post them on their website. That's how common a cast vote record is. There should be no reason why we could not get access to that public record. We talked about that, and you said it was a JSON file, and you were not able to read it. my understanding, and talking to the computer experts, is the JSON file is a flexible file that can be read by different programs like Excel or similar to Excel. And that's why you were unable to read it.
That's correct, but it was also a Dominion machine, and it's one of those machines that it's an electronic interface. So in other words, I'm the voter, I interface with an electronic screen,
Yeah.
and then I cast my ballot on the screen. It saves a CVR for the audits later on. It prints out a ballot that goes to a tabulator. That was the reason why those are done that way, because they have to use them for their public audits, and they're allowed to take pictures of the ballots. Our state law says we can't take pictures of the ballots. And so we have to be careful with that whenever you're looking through it. Our state law very clearly says you can't take a picture of the ballot, but those machines, in that particular one, does.
Yes. Mr. Chair, and we're not asking for ballot images, we're just asking for the cast vote records, which is basically you scan your ballot and then the tabulating machine makes an electronic tally of that. And Mr. Chair, Mr. Lassiter and Cindy Muller did meet with one of our computer experts who is a world-renowned physicist, Nobel Prize nominee, Dr. Douglas Frank. He has numerous inventions that you probably have used. And when he was addressing them, he said that because South Dakota, I believe the number that we came to was 50% of the votes were absentee. We were trying to discuss it was 40 or 60. We were trying to decide on what that was. But if it is 50% of the votes are absentee, I don't know if that's just for Pennington County or the state of South Dakota. He said that's where the majority of the fraud would be taking. So we are investigating that right now as a grassroots organization.
So Chairman,
Commissioner Adcock.
so the word is discrepancies. You have 4,000 discrepancies. So when Sarah spoke about discrepancies, I'm going to guess they were discrepancies with signatures, signage, how people were signing because they didn't match. Basically, if they were in the wrong precinct, those votes, are you talking about discrepancies that way? Because it sounds like when you're talking about discrepancies, there can be 4,000 discrepancies that way. And so if you're talking about discrepancies, those aren't fraud. She explained the difference between fraud and discrepancies. So are you guys calling discrepancies fraud?
To the best of my understanding, when we were referring to the Secretary of State, Mr. Chair, are we talking about the Secretary of State's website, those totals, or are we talking about the affidavits?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. You're telling me discrepancies. So what are you calling discrepancies, and
Yes.
are you calling discrepancies fraud? Are you calling a signature that, like she said, Deb didn't sign her ballot a discrepancy or fraud? Are you calling what somebody's signature didn't match because it wasn't quite right fraud?
Yep.
Did you see
I
what
get
I'm
what you're
saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, so I've seen a couple of the affidavits, and the way that the affidavit reads when the person is given their written testimony is that so-and-so does not live here and they voted, or someone so-and-so is dead and they voted. That's so to my best of my understanding, that's fraud. I get what you're saying with discrepancy, and that's really where the debate is at. Well, are we just talking about, someone moved and they didn't re-register there and their address is different, so when we go through the voter rolls, but these are dead voters, ghost voters, people that moved that voted, don't live here, live in maybe the state of Texas and voted.
Mr. Chairman.
Can I have a
LaCroix.
clarification?
I'm just going to make, I think we're getting into what our special meeting is going to be about. But I just wanted to make something very clear, some of the statement that you made about us with having Sarah here, that was planned way before you even came onto the agenda. It just got pushed back. So I wanted to make that clear, and I think I cleared that up with you in our conversation. It was no setup for all this stuff. And you're actually getting quite a bit of time here today, so I would be guessing it's over a half hour. But I mean, and I told you, this council, this commission believes in hearing the public, and that's why they voted on having that special meeting, is to hear that. Because when you put it on the agenda, it was a request for a special meeting. It wasn't to have 8 speakers that would take up most day. That's why the commission decided to do that. I believe in good faith this commission heard you, set up a date. There was no conspiracy to do bad politics by having one side more than the other. They did it in good faith and intent. This is just a comment. I don't want a response.
Anything else?
So Chairman, one more thing.
Commissioner Adcock.
In respect, I don't think it was done disrespectfully, but I think what happened was Sarah was allowed to come today. They already had it on the agenda. But in respect, I think you had that same right today to come and speak on what you wanted to. And so did your 8 people, and so did your other people, because unfortunately, that's the way it's supposed to be. Not unfortunately, that was a bad word. You had that right. So whether it was predetermined or whatever, and we had a special meeting, I don't think these guys, anybody did it to be facetious. Today was something that Sarah was supposed to speak on this. We set up a special meeting thinking that's what you wanted, so we did that. And today was something that you had the right to speak no matter what, and same with your people, but you, thankfully, you're being very respectful in bringing those people on a special meeting. So we appreciate that.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Roskinek.
Matt, if there was discrepancies, do you think it'd be more effective to you to go to the Secretary of State, Steve Barnett? Because if you come to me and you say, we got a problem, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go up to somebody that's their living. That's what they do for a living, and that's his position. So I think I'm just trying to figure out why you're not in Pier instead of you're out of Pennington County Commission.
In regards to that, there was Mr. Chair. In regards to that, there was legislation that was tried to get passed the last session, and it all got stonewalled. I've just mentioned one thing why I don't trust the Secretary of State, and if you want me to address other reasons why, but probably not, but that's one reason. I did have a special request to ask of you guys, Mr. Chair, if I could. One of our experts is not going to be able to be here the 26th. Could we have it the 27th? That's my favor to ask for if we could move it to the next day.
That would have to be a decision made by this commission. But I will tell you this, that in trying to find a date for special meetings is not easy when you're looking at trying to accommodate 5 commissioners that may have already got things scheduled, plus staff that needs to be around. I do know that I'm not available on October 27th.
Okay.
So, and I don't know the rest of the commission.
Day of the week is the 27th.
That would be Thursday.
It's Thursday. We'd set the meeting for 4 o'clock on the 26th.
Yeah. Wednesday
Thursday is a
works
little
better.
rough now that we've already scheduled it out for me. I mean, I have a full-time job and I'm usually the backup scanner, so it makes it a big challenge.
Okay.
If we could keep it on Wednesday, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for speaking today.
Yep, thank you.
Next item is 15. We have the Executive Director of the Western Dakota Regional Water System, Dr. Farrell Chapman here. Dr. Chapman. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. As I get underway, did you all receive our latest brochure about the project? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Dale Tech is out of town and unable to join me today, but sends his greetings, and as you can see, was a part of our team requesting $50,000 for a local funds match in support of this project. A quick update for you. I first want to say thank you because you were one of the very first groups to support our discussions and getting underway with talking about bringing new water from the Missouri River to western South Dakota. Inside the brochure, just briefly, is the graph, if you will, the picture worth 1,000 words, which talks about in times of drought that with today's population, not even looking ahead at all, there would be a real scarcity of water, especially in our county. And so the work was underway for since 2020 to have discussions about an alternative source of water for our area. About this time last year, a new nonprofit called Western Dakota Regional Water System was formed to address this issue, take a look at doing the technical evaluation to decide whether or not a project like this is feasible and move it forward. And that board of directors is also found inside of the brochure as well. That group held its first annual meeting December 1st in 2021 and moved forward in a more formal way. The board voted to go through a competitive procurement process late last year to select an engineering team to work with us on this project. That team includes AE2S, KLJ, and Black & Veatch. Two of those firms have offices here in Pennington County. And so, in conjunction with that, was an opportunity with the South Dakota legislature in voting on the use of American Rescue Plan Act funding. And as you might recall, nearly $600 million was approved for that to be administered and voted on by the State Water Board. And so in April, due to the applications that Western Dakota Regional Water had made, $8 million was provided as a 100% grant to us to get underway with studies. And I should note too that we were the only 100% grant. As you may know, all of the other entities other than us had to get local match for that as well. And so our engineer in place, our funding in place, we are underway with canvassing communities and other entities who distribute water to the citizens in western South Dakota right now to really firm up what that need is. And that's part of the overall feasibility study process that we are in as well. We have also subsequently applied for what they call a SWARMS grant, and for $1 million. And this is under the state, I always have to think of these acronyms, State Resources Management System, Surface Water Resources Management System. And this funding, though, allows us to use those funds for other purposes in addition to engineering, legal, administrative, different advocacy meetings that we travel to Washington, D.C., and that sort of thing as well. And so the one hook with that $1 million, however, unlike our ARPA money, requires a 25% local match. And so the board is reaching out to you and many other entities to raise $250,000 for that match. And we are just in the very beginning of that process, but the initial feedback has been very positive. And we are asking for your help with that local match in terms of a $50,000 funding toward the Western Dakota Regional Water System.
Dr. Chapman, really pleased on the money allotted by the state, by the legislature and DANR, the $8 million. To me, that really signifies the commitment that they've made at the state level, that this is a project that will now more than likely be followed all the way through completion. We know that this isn't a project that's going to be done in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. In fact, when we look at what took place on the eastern side of the state with the Lewis and Clark, completion of that project probably took at least 35 years to do that. And so it's really a work in progress from the time that it starts until it can finish. So I think the work that's been done up to this point is great. I know you are associated with Banner with some of the original information that was put together. Appreciate the fact that you're now the executive director for this group. So thank you very much for all the work that's gone into this to begin with. So,
You're welcome. Thank you.
you bet.
Chairman,
Commissioner Hadcock.
for me, the 50,000 is something that's, I think it's something we should do. I think that Helene Newham, her statement, the decision made today will make a big impact on the quality of life for many generations to come, is the perfect statement for this project. If we don't secure this water for western South Dakota or for South Dakota, I believe another state will, and we will be impacted that for generations to come. I've known Cheryl Chapman for many years, and she's used to be a county commissioner. She has impacted many people's lives on getting things done like this before. I have total trust in her of making this happen. I also believe that this project, if we don't get it done for western South Dakota, it's an economic development thing for western South Dakota that needs to happen. It's a have to for us to be able to survive in western South Dakota and to build and grow in where we need to go for the future. So again, to let these team of people to move forward, and $50,000 towards it is a big impact for them. For me, I'm, as one commissioner, believe that we should move forward on it. So thank you for all you do. I have been with you on the beginning when you first even thought about doing this again, Miss Cheryl, and I just was so excited, wow, this is going to be amazing, and I still believe it is. And again, because it's going to be an impact for generations to come. So thank you, Miss Chapman.
Thank you.
As a individual commissioner, I also am in support of this, providing 50,000 from our contingency for this purpose. I don't think the money could be better spent.
Yeah.
So appreciate you being here, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Commissioner LaCroix.
I'd move to approve the funding for the Western Dakota Regional Water System in the amount of 50,000 and direct staff to prepare a contingency resolution for placement on the November 1st, 2022 meeting agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any public comment in regard to this? Back to the commission. Any further comment, discussion?
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
LaCroix.
Just to follow up, I think, Cheryl, I mean, you've done a good job on this, and we've met with the group, I've met with a group of people that you got working with, and some things changed and wanted to expand and so forth, but I think now's the time more so than ever before, and I know Mr. Drews has been out promoting and working with you guys also to get in with your group, so I appreciate all the hard work that you do, and the group that you have with you that have taken on the responsibility and are looking out for 50 years from now, not just for tomorrow.
Thank you. We've got a great board and a great team, so thank you for all that support.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Roskinek.
Yeah, I'm in total support of this. I was just curious, how are the board members or the directors selected, and is there a certain term that they serve?
Well, thank you for that question. They were selected at the first annual meeting that we had December 1st next year. And my parting comment was going to be to invite you to our second annual meeting, which is November 29th. And you'll be getting more information on it, but it will be held in the community room in New Underwood. And so that is the time at the annual meeting when the board elections happen. We'll do board elections again. We haven't set those terms yet as we're just getting underway, but I will see if many of those who are on the board wish to run again, but
Sure.
moving in that direction.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank
All
you.
those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Appreciate it.
Miss Cheryl.
Item 16, Sheriff Kevin Tome.
Just Kevin Tone, Pennington County Sheriff, just informed me of a vehicle purchase, part of our normal fleet rotation update in our budgeted dollars, and just needs to be reflected in the minutes. And so,
Chairman,
Commissioner Hadcock.
it's signed by Brian Mueller, though. It only CCs you.
you only can put up with me a few more meetings, so it's like.
I had to.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix.
I'd move to approve purchase of 3 vehicles through the Wagner Auto Pier, South Dakota Interstate Bid Contract number 17620 as follows. 2 2023 Dodge Chargers all-wheel drive V6s for a total purchase price of $70,194, and for 1 Dodge Charger all-wheel drive V6 for a total purchase price of $34,933.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any public comment? Any further comment by the commission? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank
you. Dustin Willett.
We love you, Mr. Tome. Sheriff Tome.
Good morning, Commission. Dustin Willett, Pennington County Emergency Manager. 2 agenda items before you from Emergency Management today. Item A is the 2023 funding agreement between Pennington County and the United States Geological Survey. This is for the flood warning system that we operate jointly here between Pennington County is represented by Emergency Management, the National Weather Service, and the USGS satellite-based system of flood gauges and precipitation gauges that have given us advanced warning of flooding conditions since 1997, 1998, when this agreement first went into play. So that's an annual agreement that we sign every year. The amounts are as expected. I think we had about a 2% increase from last year, but we are charged actual dollar amounts that the USGS incurs maintaining the sensors and the satellite time. So it's not just an arbitrary, we just get X percent every year. Those are real numbers incurred by USGS staff and maintenance of our system. So happy to stand for questions, but I'm seeking the chair's signature on that agreement for the 2023 fiscal year for the government.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix.
Move to approve chair signature and joint funding agreement 23 NTFA 0030 between Pennington County and the United States Geological Survey, USGS, for operation and maintenance of the Met Warren flood warning system.
Is there a second? And a second. I got a motion and a second. Any public comment? Any further discussion by the commission? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you,
Item
Commissioner.
B.
Item B, pre-disaster mitigation grant award acceptance. So our current pre-disaster mitigation plan, and again, this is a plan that has a 5-year validity after it's approved by FEMA, by the state, and then FEMA. Our current plan is approved through September 26th of 2024. The planning process that goes into updating that plan is significant, so we've started the process of completing the next iteration of that plan. Part of that process this time was engaging Black Hills Council of Local Governments and applying for some funds through FEMA to help fund this update program for our mitigation, our next mitigation plan. We were successful in that grant application. FEMA has made the offer of that grant award, and the item before you is, again, the chair's signature on accepting that grant funding. I believe that grant funding, I printed it out and then buried it. Here we go.
Says the federal share will not exceed 52.5.
Yep.
Should the total eligible project cost be less than 70,000, the respective federal and sub-applicant share will be reduced accordingly.
Correct.
So I presume that's reduced percentage-wise, so if it's 60,000, it's
Correct. So this is a 25% matching grant is the
25,
way that
okay.
works. The
Okay.
52,500 is the cash that's approved through FEMA. The remainder 25% is an in-kind match with Pennington County. Right now in our budget projections, that is all soft match. So
Okay.
staff time and vehicle mileage and those types of things that support that soft match. So it's a 25% match by the county. We're anticipating all of that to be soft match. If the project comes in under budget, they'll be reduced percentage-wise accordingly.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner LaCroy.
I'd move to approve the chair's signature on the pre-disaster mitigation PDM grant award EMD 2021 BR-061-009 for the development of the Pennington County multi-jurisdictional pre-disaster mitigation plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Public comment. Seeing none, back to the commission. Any further discussion, comment? If not, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you. Item number 18, Barry Tice.
Good morning, Barry Tice, the Director of Pennington County Health and Human Services in the Veterans Service Office. I bring before you a proposed logo and name change for Health and Human Services.
That's nice.
As I explained in the memo, we, especially over the past couple of years, when it comes to incorporating the word health within the work we do, it's become confusing to the public, especially when it comes to South Dakota Department of Health and even on the federal level when it comes to Health and Human Services. And so staff members and myself worked with Dawn Claymore from Midwest Marketing because she's really knocked it out of the park on some other things we've done with Midwest, and explained to her what the primary divisions are within Health and Human Services, and really it's economic assistance, veteran services, and diversion programming, which includes transitional coordination of safe solutions and detox and residential treatment, as well as the rebound reentry program. And so we wanted to get your opinion on this. Of course, this would be kind of a new direction we'd go with this. Not all this information, I know it gets a little confusing with really that's the new mission statement, connecting you with resources and support. On letterhead, this would be a smaller logo, and that might be included at the bottom of the letterhead. And on apparel, I would say Human Services, Economic Veterans, and Diversions. So really wanted to incorporate the use of the logo that the other departments currently have within this. And so that is what Midwest Marketing designed for us, and our staff liked it. It's easy to, rolls out of our voice a little easier, especially for the thousands of calls we have answered a year. And so with that, I don't want to get into the history on the logos and the names, but you can see within the memo, it's really evolved. It's much more appropriate now than it has been in the past when we referred to things as poor relief and welfare and pieces like that.
Chairman,
Commissioner Adcock.
I think it's a really good logo. It tells a little bit more about what Barry and the Health and Human Services does, so people understand that it's not just a certain thing. It encompasses veterans, because a lot of people I don't think know that they do and help veterans over in the Health and Human Services area. So, and economically what they do, and that it does have diversion in there as well. So those three pieces are huge for Health and Human Services. So I like the logo. I think it's pretty awesome.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner LaCroy.
I agree with Deb. But when I was first reading through this, I thought, wow, that's way too much. But when I see this, that's what I was looking for. It makes absolute sense. When I refer people to you, it's kind of tough when we're saying Health and Human Services, and so I think this is perfect for you guys.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Roskinek.
and I agree with Deb and Commissioner LaCroy that it does a good job summarizing the services that your department does for the Pennington County. So to me, it's a good-looking logo, and it gets to the point.
Chairman.
Commissioner Adcock.
Move to approve the new name, mission statement, and logo for Pennington County Health and Human Services to be referred to as Pennington County Human Services Economic Veterans Diversion Connection, is it supposed to be connecting?
Connecting, yes, it
Connecting,
is.
connecting you with resources and support.
Support. Second.
Is there any public comment? I wrestled with it a little bit of trying to figure out if health needed to be in there or not. Came to the conclusion that from your memo that no, it didn't. And so I think it's good. I like it. Any further discussion, comment by the commission? All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 19, Building Committee, Director Mike Cool.
Good morning. Mike Cool, Director of Pennington County Buildings and Grounds. When the county constructed a new addition to the courthouse for entrance and screening services, we shelled in 2 floors above that area. The court system has sought earlier this year that we, through the building committee, request a build out of those 2 floors to meet some of their needs. Of course, we have our needs assessment work that has been going on along the way as well. So trying to view that work, the requested work through what the needs assessment has produced. Today, I'm bringing forward their request to build out the 3rd floor into a conference area of that space. It is based on what we've seen from the needs assessment, is it fits with the goals of that that have been put together by BKV, fitting along with that. So trying not to spend money twice when we can avoid it. So this is something that we think can fit the long-term needs of the court system, and therefore should be moving forward. I'm seeking authority to enter into an agreement with Co-op Architecture to do this work. As a building committee recommendation that requires us to take this through 2 meetings. Initially, the estimated project budget at this time is $182,417. We'll be seeking an initial preliminary budget is $30,000 to begin work. We may be able to combine this with other work to make it more attractive to get contractors interested in this. We've scaled back some of our other work relative to the public safety building on some of the lobby work there. So we're thinking that we may be able to try and work both of these projects together, to generate the contractor interest in them. So we'd like to get this one moving.
So, Mike, the 182,000 is strictly for design a design proposal, is that?
The 182,000 is the entire project budget.
It is the entire project, okay.
By their terms at this point in time,
Okay.
when we haven't really got into, all we've done is some preliminary concept work.
Okay, okay, thank you. Any questions? Now, it'll be placed on
The next agenda.
next agenda. Appreciate it, Mike.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Item 20, Cindy Moeller. Items from the Compensation Committee.
It is still morning. Good morning.
It is.
Cindy Moeller, Pennington County Auditor. Yes, first of all, I would like to thank the commission for bringing back together the Compensation Committee because I think it's very helpful to sit down with fewer people than trying to discuss it at department head meeting. Thank you. The commission, or the Compensation Committee looked at, I mean, we've been watching what's going on around in the area, and I put together a few of those numbers for you. And basically, the Compensation Committee is coming forward with a request to approve a different wage scale than what has previously been approved for 2023. And what this does is it takes the base rate for the wage scale, the 22 wage scale, and increases all of those ratings by 4%. And they felt that that was just a little more equitable than what was previously proposed with the one that was adopted. And it is coming from a committee, so it will have to be put on the agenda for the next meeting if you'd like to take action on it. I've put together a few numbers on it, and I gotta find the right page here. There are a lot of departments that with this increase, they're gonna be able to absorb it into their 23 budget, so they won't require any sort of supplement to handle this. Of course, with the sheriff's office, some of the larger departments, it's a little harder to do that. And with some of the rising costs, like buildings and grounds, we're probably looking at having to do a supplement. Estimating that we probably have to supplement about $650,000 to the 2023 budget. Which if we, I actually had to adjust that number. That's down from what I had previously looked at. But I think we're still going to be at about 19%. And then I want the commission to understand too that we did receive some unanticipated revenue this year from the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund. And that is $1 million this year, just a little over $1 million, and then that will also be a little over $1 million next year. So that might help us sustain our reserves and get us through 23 when we can actually look at the wage scale a little bit more, which is what you guys have directed the Compensation Committee to do.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix.
Well, I want to thank the Compensation Committee. I know Deb's on there and all you guys for the hard work you did, because as a commissioners, you know, we hear bits and pieces from different departments when we're trying to do things, and this puts you guys in a room together to find out what's fair for everybody, and I think you guys did. And I was kind of surprised when I seen that award, that grant award to Pennington County for the tribals also. I emailed you when I seen that, and I thought, that's something we can use. So I think this, we're not up there with the highest and we're not the lowest right now, but I think we're doing something for our employees and everybody here. And I think, we'll see how things go for next year, but I think you guys found a good compromise, and I support it.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Oskinek.
Cindy, I want to thank you for reaching out to Minnehaha, Lincoln County, Meade County, and Rapid City, seeing what they're doing relative to wage adjustments, so that makes this a lot easier to support with that information.
Mr. Chair, if I may, that was information that John had provided earlier. So I took that from an email that I had had from you.
Well, thanks for putting in this memo because it makes it a lot easier.
You're welcome.
I like the way this provides the equity for all employees. So I think it's a good recommendation, good suggestion. Any further comments?
Chairman.
This, again, is another item that needs to come back to the November 1st meeting. Commissioner Adcock.
I won't take any credit for this except for listening to your staff, your department heads that actually did a great job of discussing. You have a good team that had major discussion back and forth and had to get on a board for me and maybe a couple other ones in order to explain it even better. So thank you, Cindy and Joe, for explaining it, but others that were, including Sandy, that were helping us figure out what was the best solution. And we have a good chair and vice chair that really help us understand what we're doing. So we appreciate that. And our secretary is Miss Laura. So we have some really good conversation in there. So it didn't happen overnight. We just kept discussing and discussing, and we're coming up with some really good solutions. But believe it or not, I'm not talking as much as I am listening, believe it or not, because they've got this. So it's real good. And Sheriff and Assistant Sheriff Brian Mueller are putting in some really good input. The experience of Sheriff Tom has made a difference as well, so we appreciate that. Anyway, it's been great being on this. I've never been in any compensation or any of those committees before, so I'm going to say it. I wasn't in favor back in the day and helped. As you remember, Commissioner LaCroix taking out the compensation committee because I didn't think it was beneficial. And I'm going to say I was wrong, and that it is very beneficial, and they are making a difference for what we can do for Pennington County and our employees. So thank you all for putting this team back together and let me be a part of it.
Anything further?
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you. It'll come back on the next agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Item 21, Holly Hennies.
Commissioners, at the last board meeting, you approved a resolution to fund Black Hills Council of Local Governments for a consultant in regards to the natural resources management budget for the forest plan revision. It was brought to my attention by the auditor's office that I transposed two numbers and I have the wrong account number. So, in order to correct that, this is a new resolution reflecting the correct budget number.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Roskinek.
I will move to approve Resolution 2022-C1, correcting the fund number of the National Resources Management budget to 101-0615 and authorize the auditor's office to issue payment to the Black Hills Council of Local Governments in the amount of $50,000.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any public comment? Back to the commission. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask the commission to give consideration, our last item on the agenda today, number 28. Well, it's just before the adjourn. I guess it's not the last item. But I think Mr. Uhrig is here. And would you have an objection to moving item number 28 up to on the agenda before 22?
That'd be my
Sure,
motion.
I'd make that motion,
Yeah.
but now I guess I'll second it.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So we will now consider item number 28, request for permission to bore a water line under Baseline Road for agricultural and residential purposes. So,
Sorry, board, I was in the other room. And we'll also have to move executive session up too, because the contract for this item is an executive session.
okay, so that discussion needs to be before?
Yes.
I'm okay waiting. I'm enjoying it, so.
Okay.
Move to go into executive session.
Second.
Yeah, we could just do that really quick if you guys want to do that.
Okay. I've got a motion and a second, go into executive session. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Regular session.
So moved.
Got a
Second.
motion
Second.
and a second to come back to the regular session. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So item number 28.
Move to approve chairman's signature on encroachment agreement between Pennington County and Clapper's Ranch LLP for a private utility installment under the public right-of-way on Baseline Road.
Second.
Got a motion and a second.
Megan Krieger with the state's attorney's office. I just came up here because Joe had to step out because he had to go to a different meeting. It was my understanding that he opposed it. I also understand that the commission has decided that they are going to likely sign this agreement. I will stand for any questions.
Chairman,
Commissioner Hadcock.
when I talked to Joe yesterday, Megan, Joe actually didn't oppose it. So
Okay.
I appreciate that, but when I talked to him yesterday, he didn't oppose it. So thank you, Megan.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, the only thing I was gonna do for the people that Zoom, not Zoom in, but watch YouTube, I was gonna read what actually on our agenda so they know. And that is a request for permission to bore a water line under Baseline Road for agricultural and residential purposes. Justin Urig and Dean Klapperick and R&R Trenching. Just wanted to read that in for the record.
Okay. Any public comment in regard to this? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
And Gary, I'll
Thank you.
take that right now because we're going to go up and have it signed and filed and everything.
Justin, did you want to say something?
Probably.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate you guys taking the time to see this and bumping it ahead today. Just a question too, and I pose this to Megan, is this going to be the process for now, interim, for other people that are going to come ahead to apply for a bore to go under another county road? Because I do know there's other people that are going to want to now, knowing that there isn't a way to accomplish it at this point.
I think the intent, at least on my part, is to try to get legislature to adopt a statute which actually extends the authority to counties to do this.
Okay.
And so that will probably be our next move to try to do that.
Okay.
Whether somebody comes before that or, ahead of the time that can happen or not.
Okay.
Chairman.
Just have to see. Commissioner Hadcock.
Also, they're going to revise ordinance 11. Megan and Joe, to make sure that maybe through that, they might not have to go through the legislature. There might be some other ways to get it through other ways of encroachment. So Gary is right. We might have to go further as well, but if we can do it through the county, we're going to go through the county too. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Megan, you got what you needed?
Yes.
Okay.
Chair, has Senator Kamak reached out to you then to lead that discussion or to have that discussion? I know I've talked to him some and just didn't know if that bridge had been made yet to, I guess, and it's not pertinent to this meeting or anything like that. I just wanted to know if I should pick up a conversation with him to kind of help usher it along, or if you guys will continue with that process on your own accord.
And I'm sorry, Justin, I missed who you're referring to.
Senator Kamak, Gary Kamak.
Oh, okay. I would certainly continue a conversation with him, and I will also reach out.
Okay.
So we'll try to develop the language, the suggested language for that, and make a submission and find legislators to support it. And if Senator Kamak is one of those that would like to do that, that's great.
Okay. He had expressed interest, and I do appreciate everything you guys have done. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we are at item 22, items from the public. And I don't believe I have any speaker request forms for anybody for items from the public, and this is the time and place that you can express concerns about other items that are not agenda related. Any items brought up will not be no action will be taken on. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll go on to item number 23.
Move to go into Board of Adjustments.
Got a motion to go to the Board of Adjustment. All in favor of that motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And so, as we said, as a Board of Adjustment, this indicates by statute that Board of Adjustment needs to have a supermajority in favor of an item, and so it requires four positive votes from the commission in order to adopt any recommendations. Item A.
Morning, Commissioners. Jason Tennyson, Assistant Planning Director. Agenda item A is variance 22-20 to reduce the required setbacks from the property line. This item was continued from the October 4th, 2022 board meeting. The applicants are Brent and Denise Jeerdsma. Their agent is Jared Alstrom, and he is in the audience if you have any questions for him. I'll just give you the update since the last meeting. So on October 5th of this year, staff conducted a site visit with the applicants, their agent, County Highway, and Commissioner Hadcock. Property markers and National Forest boundary markers were identified. However, utility and access easements were not identified and were not marked. There appeared to be a potential build site on a lower portion of the property. If you look at the map here, we walked the portion of the property down here, but as you can see, there is a section line on that property which would also limit development. I also drew some lines on here because this rapid map image doesn't line up. It's not survey quality. So based on where the property pin marker is on top of the hill, I kind of adjusted and drew in some lines. Again, it's not survey quality, just for reference, just to show how much of this property kind of goes into this elevation change. And I have a photo of that portion of property as well, which is there. So in all actuality, the easement plus 25-foot setback from that property line easement would put them somewhere up here on this side of this hill, in my estimate. So with that, staff's findings have not changed. Topography does limit buildable area on this property, and staff recommends approval of variance 22-20 with conditions.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lassiter.
So since you've got this picture up and you were just talking about that, Jason, you're telling me that this little steep incline, where would the house be and what, based on this picture, the house would be where, and then the encroachment would be where, roughly?
So based on my estimates here, looking roughly at where this topography changes on this map and basically looking where I was standing when I took this picture, I would believe the house would have to be here in this area, possibly even further up on the hill to meet the 25-foot setback. This line here that the folks are standing at would be this property line here in this area. And then you have a 25-foot setback from there, plus the 66 or 58-foot setback from the section line really narrows down the available buildable area on this portion of property, in my opinion, based on that topography.
And refresh my memory where the house currently is wanting to be placed?
They're proposing to put it up here. So this would be the site plan, property lines here. You can see the applicant's agent has drawn in the 25-foot setback required. What they're requesting is 9-foot setback from that property line instead of the 25.
And there's no way that goes across the property line whatsoever, correct?
No, it doesn't. It stays out of the easements. It stays off of the property line by 9 feet.
Thank you.
I do have more pictures of the site visit if anyone's interested in that, as far as what the topography looks like of the proposed site.
If you would, Jason.
Yep, so this would be looking to the southwest from the proposed building site. As you can see, topography is definitely an issue up there. Here is actually where the house would be built. They would have some blasting to do to take out some of these rocks to make it a more of a flat level surface. And you can see, I got a couple pictures here, I did, right here. So this property pin is clearly marked, and I tried to capture both directions. So if you're looking to the southeast, you can see another pin here. So this would actually be the property line extending this way, and then from this way, it would extend straight up where this fence post goes. So they're working with a really limited area up on top of that hill. And this would be the reverse angle, so that property pin is up kind of behind this silver SUV in relation. Just try to get your bearings there.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Roskinek.
Hold on.
Jason, would you put the aerial up, the GIS map? So if you, yeah, go back, yep. So go to the north half of that, to the west. Yeah, down a bit more. So right in there, the realtor that had that listed, he sent me the listing. And so he had a number of people look at that particular piece of property, and that's where they wanted to build. And right out of the listing, it says, beautiful building sites throughout the property. So when he marketed that, he was marketing that as a number of potential building sites. Now, the site that you're looking at, that's one of them. And you can build there, but you don't need a 25-foot variance. If you build that specific house, you will need that variance. But there's a lot of other options that you can build and not request the variance. And that's why I have a really hard time supporting this variance.
So I don't know where he gleaned his information from when he listed that property, but he's not a surveyor and he's not a planner. So I don't know where he could have studied the area with any credibility to say there's 8 places to build a house out there.
I'm just saying the property was sold as a number of potential building sites.
Sure. Well, he's a realtor. He's trying to sell a property.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a clarifying question too?
Commissioner Lassiter.
Have there been any percolation tests on any of those sites to determine, since they're going to have an on-site wastewater treatment?
No.
Okay.
So Jason, or Chairman, sorry.
Commissioner Hadcock.
Okay, so do me a favor, Jason, show me the rest of the pictures you took that day. When you're walking down.
So this would be, the potential building site would be up in this portion of the picture, and then you walk, traverse this easement down towards the potential building site, which would have been over here.
That's the one you talked about with Travis?
Correct.
The one that wouldn't have really a lot of the setback with, there wasn't a lot of buildable site on. Do you have a picture where Commissioner Roskinek was saying that the realtor thought was a great building site? Because I remember that being a drainage area.
It is a drainage area for Lena Gulch.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever went down that area to take the picture. You can probably see it from here, though.
Yeah.
Down in this area.
So when we had Sean and those guys, Sean and Joe actually came with us. It was a drainage basin in that area coming off that hill. And then if you looked, because you were looking west, if you were on top of the hill, you had 2 drainage areas. You had the drainage coming right off the hill we were on, and then you had the drainage coming from the north. So that nice drainage basin that the realtor thought was a great spot was actually a drainage basin area for a buildable site. The second site was the area that we thought would be a great area, and then Jason researched it and found out the setbacks in some other areas based on the pins that were out there, and what was out there, that buildable site wasn't, they would need more setbacks on it, meaning more variances. Also, where you show coming down the road, so we were coming down the road and it is a public easement, and those roads were locked with padlocks. So we parked at the top of the hill. So this one was blocked, and it's not supposed to be blocked. The other one was padlocked. If you see, the one on the right is padlocked, and this one was blocked with sticks or whatever. It's a public easement. It's not supposed to be blocked, by the way. So both, or anybody could go down that. And then further down the road, if you'd show, Jason, there's a 50-foot easement with a storage shed on the right that needs to be removed. It's actually in the 50-foot setback. So on a 50-foot setback on a road, that storage area is, whoever that storage area is, has to be moved because there's no actually variance for a setback on a road. So we found out a couple issues on this road that when we're walking down also had some issues. It wasn't just the people that were trying to build the road. So we found out, number one, buildable site 1 was a drainage area. Number 2, that we had a blocked easement, that we had a setback variance issue with a storage area. We found that we had Jason had researched that second area that needed to be a buildable site, needed more setback areas or variances. And then the top of the hill, while we were going down the road, we had one of the neighbors took our pictures of our vehicles because we could not drive down this road. It was blocked of our license plates and our vehicles. So it was kind of a weird situation at the time. And then we talked to these people, and they also said when they were up on there, the people that own this property, that the neighbors down the street were holding white flags on them. And I don't know what that means, but I didn't go ask neighbors what white flags mean when you drive by. But I'm not getting it. You should be able to build on your site what you need to a certain extent, and everybody should have to follow the rules. For me, the variance that this variance that these couple needs is on a side of a cliff. So it's not on an easement on a road, it's not affecting a road, it's a side of a cliff on a property that no one's gonna build, or it's not gonna affect anybody. Does that make sense? So if you're asking for a 9-foot setback on the side of a cliff that nobody's really gonna use anyway, you're not really gonna affect anybody. If you're asking for a 9-foot setback on a road or a public easement, you can't get it anyway, but I could see that there would be an issue. And then we did look at, again, with 2 other engineers, Joe and Sean, also said, well, I would build those other places too. But then Jason researched them and found out they were drainage areas and there wouldn't be a lot of buildable sites. So based on his research is what I found out factual, and some of the things that were happening from other investigations that we had, that the people put their house where they put it for that reason. So again, I think they did their due diligence by where they want to put their house. And for me, I think Jason did a great job at doing the investigations he needed to do in order to make a good decision from the planning department.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lassiter.
So my input, I know I didn't go out to the site, but we talked about this last time, for staff to approve a variance is rare. And so for them to have gone out and done all this work, and I know, I think all of y'all went out there and did a site visit. I was the only one who was unable to make it. But one, people, are we going to micromanage where they put their homes? And I ask that question because we've done variances for other individuals throughout the county. I mean, there's individuals who add on to their home and we approve a 5-foot setback from their property line because they built a garage and they shouldn't have built a garage, but they came in, they got caught, they came in, we approved it, and we just said only for that house or whatever. And so this is the home site that this family picked. It met the criteria. We have rules and regulations, but they followed the rules and regulations, requesting a variance, and for the very purpose of what they want, which is to build the house they want in a particular location. And their only confines is how close it's going to be to a property line. That's why I was asking, is it going to go over the property line or any of that kind of stuff, which, then it's a little bit different from my perspective. But I can't understand why this wouldn't be considered as a variance when we've done variances like this for other people based on topography, based on the size of the home that they want to build or needed to build. I mean, I don't know all those particulars, and of course, staff's recommendation. So that's just a couple of my 2 cents on there. There's a few things I want to ask, but I'd rather wait till the other individuals on either side come up and either oppose or support this particular piece, because I have some questions.
So, Commissioner Roskin.
So I'm looking at the topography map, and Lena Gulch, those intervals on that topography map are 40 feet. So if you go down the center of that gulch and you go to over there by the west boundary, you've increased your elevation by 40 feet. So I don't buy that low area. You don't build in the low area. You go to the west where you're elevated, and there's plenty of room to build a home in that location. I think we have to look at what the spirit of a variance is. And the spirit of a variance is if there is no other possible building site, and I'm saying that there's at least two, maybe not with the view that the other one has, but they're building sites. And with that being said, there's no way I can support a variance on this.
I tend to agree on that. I think the variance is based on hardship, and quite frankly, I think with some adjustments here, that a house can be built on this property, and not create a hardship without a variance. And so, after being out there and looking at it, I would agree that probably if I was going to build a house on there, I'd probably want close to that same location where they're suggesting. But at the same time, I think that can be adjusted. Either the house plan can be adjusted, or it can be adjusted distance-wise, so that the variance is not required. I think one of the big differences here, as compared to many of the others that Commissioner Laster is talking about, is we have property owners that are opposing this variance. I don't know if this could have been worked out with the existing property owners, prior to requesting a variance or not. And that discussion is probably long past at this point in time. But I don't think a variance is justified on it.
Chairman.
Commissioner LaCroix.
I'm the only one that haven't added in yet. I went out and looked at this property Sunday, and quite frankly, I didn't go down the path. It was blocked off. So I respect people's properties, and I had my map, my agenda, and I was looking for it, but when somebody has it closed off, then I'm assuming it's private. But I did go up on the top of the part where there was the markings and everything else, and I walked around up there and so forth. When I look at this, I'm not disagreeing with what's been said here today. I mean, I could go either way. But I looked at that site and the topography of that whole area, it's tough. I looked at a property just before that where the roads getting up and out were so steep, it was a struggle. And then I come to this one and I see, I hear you guys talking, well, if you can go down this road, you can build over here, you can go over here. But I also look at the potential of road blockage and fires, and it seems to me that access was fairly good access all the way up to that property, and it seemed to work. So and with the 9.7, if this was in town, we got houses that are 8 feet from there. So, and this is spread out. So I supported staff's decision the first part around because it's very rare. And I actually went out and walked around, and I didn't get the full picture is what some were saying, but that's because part of the road was blocked off too. So I'll just put my 2 cents in. I'll wait and hear the public comment.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lassiter.
Jason, can you speak to that public road? Deb made a comment about it being a public road. There was a gentleman that was shaking his head in the audience. I just want to understand, is that a public road that should be open for public access, or what's up?
It's right here. It's a 50-foot wide easement for private access and utilities.
That's that access that was blocked.
Right. Yeah, it should not be blocked off.
Why?
Because it does provide this property owner, the applicants, access to the remainder of their property.
Any idea how long that easement has been in effect?
Oh, I don't have that original document with me. I would have to go back and look. I believe it was 2002, though. I would have to double check just to make sure.
Mr. Chair.
So the building that you talked about down below there, did that exist before the easement or after the easement?
That I don't know. There was no building permit on file for it.
Okay. Commissioner Roskinek.
Oh, I was going to ask when that, according to the county assessor's property card, when that Quonset was built. It's my understanding it was built before the easement.
No building permit?
I couldn't find one on file.
I do know that the current owner bought that with the Quonset on there. So I don't know if there was a building permit for the Quonset.
So my understanding, there's a building that's on the, one of the property owners nearby that's encroaching,
That's that.
that Quonset hut.
Right.
Fairly new. So, Chairman,
Commissioner Adcock.
so number one, there can't be any more, blocking of the road, right?
Correct.
Number two, the Quonset will have to be moved because there's no variance for a, building in a private utility easement, right? So we have to, do we send them letters or whatever to that, right, to that effect? And then they have to get a building permit, am I correct?
I think first of all, it's going to have to be determined whether,
Right.
what existed first. Did that building exist before the easement? I don't know.
I'm gonna guess that that easement looks like it's been there for a while. And it's crazy to me, I'll just tell you, it's crazy to me to pick apart your neighbor when you're doing the exact same thing. So I'll just tell you that. And that this variance is off the side of a cliff and not affecting the neighbor at all. That's what is kind of crazy to me. And that the staff is agreeing with it because it's not affecting anybody but their own property. So if it was affecting somebody else's property besides them, I could see it. You know what I'm saying? That's where I'm not getting it. And then your staff's trying to tell you that that first site is in a drainage basin area because of his knowledge and what he does for a living, and that the other spot is gonna need some variances, and we're disagreeing. And that's why he is saying that, he agrees with this. So, I agree with him. Then when he found that the road was blocked and that this was in the, then he's saying we need to look into that. So that's fine. But my bottom line is, how can you say something's wrong with your neighbor's stuff when you're doing the same thing? Plus, at this point, maybe he didn't know he needed to block it, but then he knew we were coming. And then I'm told by somebody else that I need to contact him to unblock it so I can go down it when he knows we're gonna show up. What? Okay, this all don't make sense to me. Okay, so maybe I'm just more ornery, but I don't think so. I think it's, you gotta be neighbor friendly. You gotta be a little bit nicer. And why would you come up and take our pictures afterwards? I mean, are we doing something wrong when we can't go down the road? We're just trying to do our job as commissioners, and your neighbors are trying to show us something that they want us to see. So the whole thing don't make no sense to me. And Jason, I believe you did a great job, and you did your due diligence by this work, because I didn't know half of this. And you and Joe had agreed to disagree, which I appreciate. And you held your ground and you knew what you were talking about. And in the long run, you went and did some more research to figure it out just to make sure what you were saying was right. So thank you for doing that, Jason.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
Just
Osmer.
would like to point out that trail has probably been there since 1800s. I agree with that. But the easement was sometime after that, so the two don't follow each other. One was there probably 1890 when those mineral surveys were patented or recorded at the Register of Deeds office. Sometime later, when the Novotnys started breaking their property up, to sell those, they probably had to have that easement in place for the plat to get recorded. That'd just be my guess.
It's utilities.
But I keep going back to the spirit of the easement. I mean, that's what we should be looking at. Or the spirit of the variance. What is a variance and when is it needed? And I don't know that taking pictures, locking gates and whatnot has anything to do with the spirit of a variance. And I'm still going back to what I believe a variance, when it's applicable and when it's not.
Chairman.
I don't have a motion.
I'll
Okay,
move to deny.
Got a motion to deny.
Chairman, I have a substitute.
You'd need a second first. Is there a second to the original motion? No second? No second made? Motion dies. Commissioner Adcock?
Chairman, a substitute to,
You don't need a
You don't even
substitute.
need a substitute.
What?
It's just a straight
Don't need a
motion.
oh,
substitute.
okay, thank you. Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion to approve and a second. I'd ask for any public comment. Back to the commission.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner LaCroix.
I struggle with both sides of this, but I think I'm leaning more towards the motion that's on the floor because I know how hard our staff works on this and not only once, but twice went up there and looked at some of the stuff. You know, we don't always agree with our staff but they always go that extra mile, and I think they did on this part. You know, there's been some comments about the spirit of the ordinance. You know, sometimes we follow it, sometimes we don't. You know, some days it all depends on the circumstances of the commission when we actually follow that. So, you know, I get what they're saying, but I know as a commission, we haven't always followed that per rule. Because we take everything up individually, and that's what we're here for. And that's my thought process on this. You know, I walked around up there quite a bit on Sunday. You know, I probably would have done a little further down. And I usually, when I go, I don't like to have people with me because then I'm getting their what they think and what they feel. So I do my own walking around and do that. So that's why I didn't ask or invite anybody. But I'm going to lean towards this, and it's not because I don't want to follow the ordinance. I think it's a special case, and I'm just here to say we've went against the ordinance on other occasions on less circumstances than this one. So we do take them up individually, and that's the way I feel. That's what our job is to do.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lassiter.
And I'd just like to, I know I've already said this once, but you know, most of the ones that variances that we've approved oftentimes are ones that the individual's already started building or has built it and got caught. And then we were like, well, we don't really want to make them tear it down. It doesn't make sense. We'll go ahead and approve them. We usually do it for, you know, the home only or whatever it is that they happen to be building for. These individuals went through the whole process and they're trying to do it ahead of time. And you know, it's their property. This is where they determine is the best place for the house that they need for their family. And, you know, there's probably other factors that they had to consider. I don't think it's just the view. I mean, if I'm looking at a place like this, you got to deal with your septic and all the other things that are involved with it. So, again, each of these are case by case only, and I don't see how this could harm the property owner next door based on what has been presented.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No, also.
Roll call.
3-2. Roll call vote.
Adcock,
Aye.
Connect,
Nay.
Cruz,
Nay.
LaCroix,
Aye.
Laster.
Aye.
3-2. Motion dies. Thank you. Need a motion to come out of the Board of Adjustment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Consent agenda.
Board of Commissioners uses a consent agenda to act on non-controversial and routine planning and zoning items. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the board. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a board member or a citizen. The consent agenda for planning and zoning contains the following items. Agenda item B, minor plat 22-46 for Jack and Marie Zemer to combine 2 lots and create Lot 8A, Block 3 of Pactola Estates. And the Planning Commission recommended approval with 6 conditions. Agenda item C is road naming for Nate and Alexis Soboleski to name an existing 66-foot wide section line right-of-way to Sobos Road. And the Planning Commission recommended approval of the road name of Sobos Road.
Any member of the public wish to have either of these items pulled from the consent agenda so that they may be discussed? Any member of the commission want to do that? Seeing none, I'll take a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to approve the planning and zoning consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further public comment? Seeing none, back to the commission. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item D.
Cody Sack, environmental planner. Item D is Plan Unit Development Overlay Review, PU 21-03. It's to allow for a seasonal event venue / specialty resort on the subject property. The applicant is Yard Lane Company Incorporated, Shelby Woodland. The owner of the property is Rick Johnson. Location of the property is 20101 Kelly Hill Road. Involves 80 acres. Current zoning is General Agriculture District. Staff is recommending to end Plan Unit Development Overlay PU 21-03 with the applicant's concurrence, and the Planning Commission recommended to end Plan Unit Development Overlay PU 21-03 as well.
So you recommend?
Okay. Commissioner LaCroix.
Mr. Chair, I was going to go ahead and make the motion to move to end planned unit development overlay PU 21-03 with applicant's concurrence.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any public comment? Back to the commission. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item E.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Jason Tennyson, Assistant Planning Director. Agenda item E is rezone 22-26 to rezone 15.2 acres from Agriculture District to Ranchette District. The applicants are Glenn and Michelle Bentliff. Their agent is KTM Design Solutions. Property is 15.2 acres, currently zoned Agriculture District. Access is off Old Hill City Road, and there is special flood hazard area on the property. Have on the screen the current zoning districts that staff considers. It is within 1/2 mile of the subject property, so you can see open spaces identified in dark green, agriculture in light green, rural residential in yellow, and planned unit development in blue. Staff also does consider future land use within 1/2 mile. You can see the subject property is identified as ranchette and rural residential. Future land use surrounding it, open space in green, planned unit development in blue, ranchette in tan, and rural residential in yellow. Staff also looks at infrastructure, the roads and streets specifically. Old Hill City Road is a 66-foot wide 2-lane paved right-of-way. Private on-site wastewater treatment systems are common in this area, and that's what is proposed on this property. You can see also on the screen, the applicants are proposing to subdivide this property and create 2 lots. Lot 1 will be 6.15 acres and Lot 2 will be 8.46 acres, both meeting the minimum 5-acre for ranchette zoning district. Future land use, again, is ranchette and rural residential. Future land use within 1/2 mile identifies several parcels as ranchette. Existing infrastructure and roads are appropriate for a ranchette zoning district. Therefore, the request to rezone appears to be in harmony with current zoning, future land use designations, and the current comprehensive plan view to 2040, and staff recommends approval with rezone 22-26.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Oskinek.
Move to approve rezone RZ 22-26.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Public comment? Back to the commission. All in favor of the rezone indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item F.
Cody Sack, environmental planner. Item F is vacation of easement VE 22-02. It is to vacate a 40-foot wide private access easement on the subject property. The applicant landowner is Jack and Mary Ziemer, or Marie Ziemer. The agent is All Aspects Incorporated. The location of the property is near 12525 Jacks Court. It's currently zoned low-density residential district with an existing land use of residential. Access is off Jacks Court and Dakota Drive, and there's no special flood hazard area on the property. Currently on the property, Lot 8 has a single-family residence with a 10 by 22 shed and a 32 by 28 detached garage. There's an on-site wastewater treatment system on the property. And Lot 10 is 1.29 acres and is vacant of any structure. This was read around for interdepartmental review. There were no major comments or concerns that were received. The applicants are requesting to vacate the 40-foot wide private access easement on Lot 10 of Pactola Estate subdivision that provides access to Lot 8. That minor plat was just approved on the consent agenda. So with that, staff is recommending approval of vacation of easement 22-20 with conditions.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner LaCroy.
move to approve the vacation of the easement VE 2202 with one condition.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, back to the commission. Any further discussion, comment? All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item G.
Item G is Comprehensive Plan Amendment CA 22-19. It's to amend the comprehensive plan to change the future land use from Ranchette District to rural residential district to low density residential district. The applicant landowner is Free Range Rentals. Davis Engineering is the agent. Location of the property is 23707 Burton Fork Road. Current zoning is agriculture district with an existing land use of residential. Access is off Burton Fork Road, and there is no special flood hazard area on the property. This has been heard before the Board of Commissioners before. It was continued because it was continued at the Planning Commission. There was concerns with low-density residential being able to subdivide into 14 lots instead of the proposed 3 lots that the applicants were proposing. Staff contacted the owners, and they were in favor of just creating 2 lots and trying to rezone to rural residential, which is in the area. So staff is recommending to deny without prejudice Comprehensive Plan Amendment CA 22-19 with the Planning Commission's concurrence.
So move.
Second.
So your motion is to deny?
Yep, without prejudice, comprehensive plan CA 2219.
Got a motion and a second. Any public comment on this?
So, Mr. Chair, just,
Commissioner Roskinek.
so we're moving to approve to deny, right?
Moving to deny without prejudice comprehensive plan amendment.
Okay.
CA 22-19.
Okay, just want to.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion by the commission? All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item H.
Item H is rezone RZ 22-25. It is to rezone 7.2 acres from agriculture district to low density residential district. Again, the applicant and landowner is Free Range Rentals LLC, and the location of the property is 23707 Burnt Fork Road. Staff is also recommending to deny this without prejudice with the applicant's concurrence and the Planning Commission's concurrence.
I do have a couple of speaker request forms on this item also. Would John Newland like to come up, please?
Thank you, Commissioners, for the chance to speak. I've owned property up there since 1975, and I never could imagine the possibility that they could build 14 possible houses up there. And my opposition is that it would open up that whole area to being chunked off, and that it just doesn't fit in that area in my eyes. And I want it to remain kind of rural. You know, and I'm just not comfortable because once you rezone it, you can't go back. It just opens up a can of worms. So that's my opposition. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Newland. Also, is it Solway? Gary Solway?
I'm Gary Solomon. Thank you for letting me speak. I've owned property on Gold Mountain Loop for since '99, which comes right off of Burnt Fork Road. I think everyone up there that I've talked to is opposed to any zoning change. Again, like John said, it opens it to where many of us could, if it was granted, sell off a small portion, and our upper road system certainly wouldn't handle that. We're really taxed right now with 20 people living up there. It's very narrow. When you meet anybody, you actually have to put 2 tires in the ditch. And we're just limited with very steep banks on either side. So our fear is that if it's granted for one, it would possibly be granted for others. And it just doesn't fit our area. There's none within that half-mile area that are allowed. Also a concern, that whole area on down to the blacktop. So if you just followed the squared off and went on down to the blacktop, any time of year that I'm aware of, that is basically a marsh. The creek probably flows 365 at least 10 months out of the year, and it's just a spongy marsh, and I would have septic concerns, well concerns as well for that area. It's, any future septic would really be a concern, I would think. So we just hope it stays the same, because we don't feel it fits our area and opens the door to many of us doing the same thing. And we all purchased our land so we could have 4 to 6 acres and the privacy and the lifestyle we choose. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Oskinek.
Cody, could you go over one more time what the future land use of this parcel is?
So the future land use of the parcel is ranchette.
So that's kind of the roadmap for the future. And the tan is what zoning?
The tan is the ranchette. I believe what they're going to come back and apply for is rural residential, which is 3-acre lots. There's currently, it's 7.2 acres. So if they rezoned it to the rural residential, it'd fit the area. A lot of that area, as you can see, is the rural residential. And they already have 2 lots. So it'd just be adjusting the lot line. So you wouldn't really be increasing the density anymore on that lot, and they wouldn't be able to subdivide farther down without trying to rezone to low density residential again in the future.
And I think that's why the Planning Commission really had a hard time going with the low density residential, because it just wasn't in harmony with any of the Golden Mountain subdivision or the neighboring subdivision to the west. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner LaCroix.
move to deny without prejudice rezone RZ 22-25 at the applicant's request.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Items from the chair and the commission members. Start with you, Travis.
Well, I missed most of my stuff because I had some procedures. So, but I will talk about all the other things that I was able to do in between. So, Gary, you and I met with Sedita yesterday and talked a little bit about their water project and kind of the move forward with that. I'm sure we're going to get, if they haven't contacted all of us, they will be reaching out to all the rest of the commissioners to discuss that particular issue. It's dealing with the PFAS before water line. So when I caught wind of what transpired up in Meade County, I reached out to Sedita to discuss with them, and they set up a meeting with Gary and I yesterday, and then they're going to reach out to the rest of y'all, kind of let y'all know what the next plan of action is that's in the works. Lloyd and I were at the cannabis presentation about how legalizing cannabis may impact our tourism in our state. And they had a past mayor of Aspen. They kind of gave his take on it. He was there in a non-political role. He didn't take a side one way or the other, just kind of gave the brass facts on it. It's pretty informative, I think, in general. They talked about how much revenue was brought in versus how much cost it was to the community due to all the other issues. For every dollar of revenue based on the tax that they brought in, they spent anywhere between $3 and $4 back into the community dealing either with crime or care for those individuals that were impacted by the cannabis. And everyone was allowed to be there. Even the pro-cannabis individuals were part of the I don't want to say committee, the group that was on the panelists, and so they didn't even seem to even argue against that. If I remember, I don't think they countered that particular piece.
No, it's a good question and answer.
And so, obviously, most of us were at the Durr Foundation dinner. That was that was the first time I've ever been, just so you know. So it was pretty good to hear that and know what that organization is doing for veterans that are suffering with PTSD. And then I also was out in Wall, down on Creighton Road, out in Quinn, looking at some roads that constituents have issues with. Creighton Road just, if y'all remember, Joe was talking about how they were putting on some more base one. The actual base one, the citizens out there are liking what Creighton looks like right now after they put on that new base one. The gravel part of Creighton and all the way out where it goes. They're concerned that it won't last, but I said, well, let's see how it goes and go from there. I said, last time they put it on, it was too wet and rainy, and maybe that's the reason why it didn't hold quite well. But at this time, the conditions were correct, and so we're going to see, and they're going to give it a good shot and go from there. They got some concerns with some other roads, but those are on Joe's 5-year plan to work on anyway. So spent a lot of time out in the community, even though I missed the ones that I was out of the area the 3 days that all my meetings were at because I was up at the Fort Meade Hospital. So that's about it for me.
Commissioner LaCroix?
Well, I missed the ESCC 911 Users Board because I was on a Zoom meeting, and so by the time I got done with the Zoom meeting, I went to the one-stop grand opening that morning, the Health and Human Services for the state, where they combined all the services. They had their grand one-stop ribbon cutting. So I went to that. The other things, it's just been a really busy week with a lot of the stuff that, or the last couple of weeks with the Human Relations Commission MOA that I'm on. So I did make it out to do some site visits on Sunday, but I did miss the fire banquets ball. So I apologize, and I missed the other foundation on Saturday. Seems like my weekends I'm trying to catch up on my stuff that I didn't get done during the week. So I did participate on Saturday Native American parade. I was asked by Mr. Longbox if I'd participate in that, and so that was part of the problem. The car that I brought in needed some work, so I was trying to get that going and up, and so it wouldn't die on me during the parade. And by the time I got done with the parade, then at least I made it through the parade before it decided to punk out on me. But I got that running and got it back to where its home's at. But that's what Saturday, the fire banquet. By the time I got everything fixed and done, it was 5:30, and I think it started at 5. So, but otherwise, that's what I've been up to. I'll make sure to make a point to make it to the gala next year for sure.
Commissioner Huskinen?
After the last commission meeting, I went over to Pennington County Housing Redevelopment, and 2 o'clock, we did the bid opening for the 2 35-unit apartment buildings that we're going to develop this spring. And tomorrow we will accept one of those bid offerings. Then on the 6th, I went, Deb and I were both at the CARE campus. That was just one of their monthly meetings, and it was just pretty much business as usual. Deb, who was the lady there that was from New Mexico? Anyhow, she was there representing
She was pretty awesome.
Yeah, anyhow.
Native American lady, but she
Yeah,
was
really
very
nice
well
lady. Yeah.
educated and amazing.
So I think she's going to be part of our team in some capacity. I don't have that exact information, but the next day then I was at One Stop as well. It's going to be a great facility, offering a lot of services under one roof. The next day I went to Silver City, did their Booyah, which is a chicken and beef soup or something. It was good. Later that night, I went to the firefighters banquet, and I got to thank Commissioner Hadcock for those baskets that she made for that event. They were very, very well done and well received. And the building committee, Lloyd, are we doing committees or just?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't.
That's okay.
We're
We're gonna come back to you.
Go to Travis.
We did the Deer Foundation. There again, Deb knocked it out of the park with what, her contribution to that event, and a well-deserved award, in my opinion. The Vikirovich event yesterday, different lens. I didn't know what I was getting into. I thought it was just going to be a lunch and get out of there because I had to be at the Forest Service at 2. It was a lot more than I expected. When I sat down, Helene sat to my right, and the director of the YMCA sat down my left. And then when we got done eating, we had this instruction packet, and we had to take our kids to school. We had to buy gas. We had to go fill out WIC forms. We had to go back and buy gas. We went to the pawn store, got rid of 12 CDs, $1 a piece, and then went and bought more gas. And then when it was all said and done, we didn't have enough money to get the kids home from school. So the follow-up on that is poverty's out there. It's really, really bad. It's all around us, and that all these different agencies in the county and government entities, we have to work together the best that we can to help resolve that problem. I did make it to the supervisor's office in Custer of the Forest Service. He introduced the new deputy director of the Black Hills National Forest, and I don't have her name right now, but she's got some ties to the Black Hills and did some stuff for range management up in, I think, Belfouche. So she was glad to get back in the Black Hills. The thing that we really focused on yesterday were the counties that were participating. Then we also had the state of Wyoming representative with them, is to make sure that we get our memorandum of understanding between Pennington County and the United States Forest Service, get that dialed in just the way we want it. We made a lot of progress yesterday. Pennington counties will be the template for the other 4 counties. And final drafts should be in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I thank Scott Guffey for jumping in there because he knew what was missing, what needed to be changed. And there was a few situations where maize were converted to shalls. And so Jeff, he's the supervisor. We asked a lot from Jeff. He said, I'm just following protocol, but he bent, he's really given a lot, and we will have another meeting. I think it's going to be in January, and because we got folks from Wyoming, I offered to let them have the meeting here once we figure out the exact time and place. So that's pretty much all I got.
Commissioner Adcock.
So the firefighter banquet, I'm going to give recognition to Val, and she did an amazing job. I was her assistant. I would say she helped Matt get everything done. She is above and beyond efficient. She was amazing. I did do the baskets, but then she went and got, we didn't have any plaques. She called me on Thursday, so she went and got some gift certificates from Roadhouse, and then got these little cans with different stuff in them, and just pulled just whatever out of the park, however you say that, and then hit it out of the park. So anyway, Can't say enough about her and that banquet. It just is huge for the firefighters every year. Thank you for everybody that came. That's pretty amazing. They always have good food. They give roses at the door. Love doing it. And, of course, they give their lives every day for us. So, I just can't say enough about the banquet and what that does. They give firefighter of the year. Um, Adam got that, and he is just the most ADD person, and that's more than even me. So you know that's pretty ADD. He's just amazing. So anyway, then there's the let's see. I'm gonna keep my glasses on. Um, the department head meetings, I thought that went well. Thank you, Holly, for bringing the economic development. Yeah, I had to contact him, but Holly had the idea of bringing the economic development and having that done because it was something important for wage studies. So he asked lots of questions. I didn't get to make it. I was supposed to be here at 10. I ended up having some issues at the Rose, didn't get here till later. Sounds like they had lots of questions. I did make it at the end of it. And if I'm correct, Holly, it went pretty well about answering questions and stuff. So I'm glad it went well for you and the department heads. I enjoyed listening to a lot of the stuff in the conversation at the end about what the department heads asked. So thank you for setting that up gallantly forward. Again, that was the Durr Foundation. That was Sergeant Colton Durr Foundation. Jerry and Teresa's son committed suicide, Colton Durr, almost 10 years ago. They set up that foundation because they recognized that there was other vets that had PTSD and that they wanted to help other people. There is no overhead for this foundation. All of it goes to the vets. And like I said before, this award was I was very thankful for it, but it was something that surprised me because if I could give an award, it would be to them. And I would suggest, I think it's Veterans Awareness Month next month, Ms. Holly, if I'm correct, that maybe we do a Colton Durr Foundation or Colton Durr Day or something for Veterans Day, or Veterans recognition for next month for the Durr family, because if anybody deserves putting out an award and giving an award to it, be that foundation. Because again, they put everything into it and they help people across the United States, not just veterans in South Dakota. But I love working with them. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. So no, I wasn't expecting to get an award for it. I do everything I do because I love doing it. Also, the Weed and Pest Board, Scott Guffey is so efficient, there isn't much you have to worry about on Mr. Guffey. As Commissioner Ross Connect, I suggested that maybe he'd be on the board next year because those guys are like pretty close and tight on the Forest Service stuff. And we talked about Mr. Guffey, he was spraying some weeds in Wall. They found some, I don't even know half the name of the weeds, but anyway, and Mr. Jesus, whose place did you take? DeSantos. He just loves that board. And those guys, he helps them out. He got hired by them. I mean, he just is very efficient. I've never seen a guy with more passion about like Mr. Guffey on stuff. So Mr. DeSanto has found his calling. So that board is just some three good old boys with Mr. DeSanto and Mr. Guffey that have just been efficient and effective at getting things done for that board and making it very efficient with Mr. Guffey. So I think it's pretty awesome. What else? The Fire Service Board, they cut their meetings down to 6 meetings. They've changed their bylaws. So they have 6 meetings a year. If we want to have special meetings and stuff, we can by the bylaws. If anything comes up or we just want to recognize a certain thing that we'd have to do, but we do have to, with the special meetings, notify it and stuff. So they're changing a few things on that. We recognized Jerome couldn't be. He had a family issue for a banquet, so we recognized him for being our fire administrator of the year. So that was cool. compensation committee, I talked a little bit about that, but we're talking about holiday pay as well. And like I said, what an amazing group. Holly is part of that as well. She, in one sense, isn't a voting member, and but she does help us in some of the back history and things like that. So she's shaking her head no, but she does. You should see the book she prepares for me, who always needs a very extensive book. Anyway, she gets me prepared and this committee prepared for what they need to do. Plus her back experience on what has happened before with the other department heads has been very helpful. So thank you, Holly. So again, I've never been on something like that. I've been loving it. And again, I do speak once in a while, but these guys got it down pat. And they're a great group to work with. And again, any department head who would like to come visit and sit and listen to this conversation is welcome anytime. Even me, even if I wasn't a voting member, it'd be worth listening to. So commissioners, it's worth listening to because these guys know what they're talking about. And they do have some really good discussion back and forth on, it's not just a couple of people talking. All of them are participating in this conversation of what works best for Pennington County as a team. So like I said, it's been one of the better committees I've been on. So anyway, thank you.
Anything else, Deb?
I could.
We've crossed over into committee reports. Any committee report that you've left on?
You want me to keep going?
We'll come back to.
No, I'm good.
Commissioner Roskinek.
I'll let Lloyd expand on the building permit. I think we're going to be talking about some of that in executive session, so.
Okay, you were at the Central States Fair Board?
Yes, on Zoom. I tried to do Zoom.
Yeah.
And anyhow, we got, they don't use the Zoom platform, so I did it on the phone, and then I got cut off about halfway through.
Okay.
Because they're on a different platform, so I didn't know how to get back on. So I reached out to Ron and asked him if he could send me kind of an overview of the balance of the meeting, which I haven't got, so.
Okay, and I wasn't able to make that, so. Lloyd, anything else that you?
No, I did leave off the building committee meeting because that was a brief, quick half-hour meeting, I think, and we'll have discussions.
Okay. That's all?
That's it.
Done?
I promise.
Okay. I take a motion to, for vouchers.
In the amount of $940, so moved.
Abstain.
Is there a second?
Second.
I've got a motion to approve the voucher to the Rose Inn LLC in the amount of $940 with Commissioner Adcock abstaining. All those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Motion number 2 to approve the remaining vouchers in the amount of $5,178,000, $673.85.
So moved.
Got a motion, is there a second? And a second. All in favor indicate by saying
Aye.
aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I need a motion for executive session for personnel issue and contractual pending litigation.
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
We don't for the other one.
I take a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Leaving these in for next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, I gotta leave by 10 to 6. So you guys get to stay if you want to stay longer.
One thing. We are to set as to do the canvass on the election on November 10th, which is Thursday.
Okay.
Oh, no. I fly out November 10th.
What time do you fly out?
At 9, I think.
The
Okay.
morning? So we have to do it before, no, because he has to get there early.
And I can't be here. We still need a quorum.
3?
Yeah.
Me,
Can
Travis
the other
said.
3 of you be here?
Yep,
For what day?
November 10th.
We could do it at 8. We could do it at
Yeah, you could set that,
8:30.
yeah.
We do it at 7.
Well, But if he's flying out at 9, he's probably got to be
We're
there.
gonna all
by-
meet at the
Sorry, I'm
airport.
flying out tonight.
So what is this meeting for?
It's the canvas of the election.
So he gotta be at the
I
airport.
can be here.
By 8.
Yeah. I
So
can
Travis
call
and Ron and Deb can all be here?
Yeah.
I can
Just
call
remind me.
You can zoom in.
Call or Zoom.
We can be, we gotta be here. Where do we meet?
Yeah,
Here.
here.
Just the Board of Commission office?
Yep.
Hopefully it'll be a half an hour meeting tops.
Yeah, I can zoom in on the 10th. Whatever.
You can zoom in at the airport.
November 10th.
You can be zooming.
No, I'll actually be there.
There's a different one I'm thinking.
Okay. Need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
I'll go look at the machine.
So we'll see you tomorrow then?